Lin Hao, a young orphan, manages to survive by streaming his charm on social media, but his ordinary routine shatters when he is thrown into a world where strength rules over weakness. Before him appears an ancient god in monstrous form, declaring that none may flee, for the barrier encasing them cuts off all escape from the chaos void, and this is no game, but a real alien realm sealed in doom. The god commands them to venture into unknown universes where even the weakest demons, like goblins, move with terrifying speed that ordinary weapons cannot strike, leaving people in panic over how to kill them. Among the chaos are comrades who turn against others with cruel words, while unspeakable horrors roam unchecked. The god introduces itself as Agatha Nikolaos, the Great Ancient One, while despair spreads as people cry out that they can never escape, reduced to mere pieces in the god's game. Yet the god urges them forward, saying battle, struggle, and slaughter will make them grow stronger, and in their hunger for power many start racing to be first. Amid this, Lin discovers he has been granted 5 powerful plugins, one of which transforms the once fearsome demon maiden into his ally. As their hands meet, he declares that from this moment he will no longer remain just a mortal but instead become the hidden force behind the monster, a symbol glowing upon his hand. Lin taps one of the options, and a faint glow escapes from his phone as he shuts his eyes tightly, feeling a strange shift within his body. He realizes with excitement that this must be his cheating plugin. Surrounded by others yet lost in thought at the center, he notices a new confidence rising in him, no longer flustered as before, and decides to check what features the plugin grants. Beginning with the white talent bar, he sees 5 options: Trash Can, Master of Being, Invigorated Man, Kept Man, and Game Player. The first, Trash Can, allows him to digest even the worst food, making it taste like a delicacy. The second, Master of Being, makes him appear superior and cool when around others. He frowns at how bizarre these low-rarity talents sound, thinking it is normal for them to be rather useless, and turns his hopes toward the higher ones. Trying Invigorated Man, he reads that it grants exceptional talent but constant interrogation, leaving him frustrated that it sounds even worse than the white ones. Wondering if gold and red talents could be equally disappointing, he opens the red one first, Kept Man, despite his hesitation. Its description claims he possesses a practical game template, unmatched boldness, and the ability to see all creatures, even gold monsters, as mere NPCs. Lin stares at it in disbelief, questioning what possible use such a red talent could truly have. Lin pauses to think and realizes that ever since he received the cheating plugin, his confidence has grown strangely solid. At first he assumed the plugin itself gave him this feeling, but now he sees it stems from the red talent, which suppresses fear and restores calm. Impressed, he admits it is far more useful than he expected, though he wonders if he overestimated the plugin's overall power. Curious, he reopens the epic talent called Kept Man, puzzled by its odd title, joking inwardly about how many dream of being supported by a wealthy woman yet still finding it strange. Suddenly his phone dissolves into streams of data, his head pounding as if ready to split apart, leaving him staggering and barely able to stand. Though the pain is unbearable, he tells himself it must be the cost of the cheating plugin and forces himself to endure. Just then his eyes widen, because before every person around him floats a translucent screen revealing their stats. Staring in shock, he realizes this game-like interface did not exist moments ago and reads his own details: condition healthy, rank level 0, strength 3, physique 3, agility 2, mentality 8, and all 5 talents: Trash Can, Master of Being, Invigorated Man, Kept Man, and Game Player. A prompt even questions how he possesses so many talents, hinting at cheating. He quickly understands that this must be the true power of the Game Player talent, a character introduction panel he can summon or dismiss with a wave of his hand. Testing it, he swipes left and right until he masters appearing and disappearing the screen, satisfied that it will not hover permanently to annoy him. Just as he practices, he notices a girl standing behind him and instinctively checks her stats. The prompt warns that despite her delicate appearance, she is a trained fighter with attributes surpassing his own, easily capable of knocking him out, and adds that his Kept Man talent is now active. As their eyes meet, she smiles, and her status shifts from natural to friendly. Lin feels relieved, thinking both the Red Game Player talent and the Kept Man talent are proving more practical than he first believed. The girl walks up to Lin with a gentle smile, asking if his parents are nearby, and he thinks to himself that while he may look young, he hardly seems like a lost child. He notices she stays cautious of her surroundings, uneasy like everyone else, yet she still chooses to check on him first, proof that his Kept Man talent is at work. She reassures him that she means no harm, and he replies that he is an orphan. Watching her, he reflects that a girl strong in battle and kind at heart might be the best ally he could hope for, especially since his plugin offers little direct combat power, and he resolves to build a bond with her. Surprised, she apologizes for her earlier assumption, and he answers with a small grin that it is nothing new, as many people ask the same thing. Growing serious, he asks if they are truly trapped here, and she begins to say yes, recalling the being who claimed to be an ancient god, but cuts herself off midway, choosing instead to pat his head and promise to protect him. He thanks her warmly, and as she takes his hand to walk with him, she asks his name, guessing he is still in middle school. He introduces himself as Lin Hao, explaining she can call him Little Mouse, a freshman just starting high school, and privately thinks it makes for a simple cover. She nods and tells him her name is Yun, saying fate must have brought them together, and he agrees to call her that. From behind, a muscular man approaches, warning Yun not to wander around recklessly since danger could be anywhere. She brushes off his concern, confident in her abilities. But when he eyes Lin suspiciously, Yun leans close and whispers that the boy is an orphan in his first year of high school, and surviving here will be hard for him. The man, named Wei, frowns and argues they can barely protect themselves, yet Yun insists they should help Lin anyway. Yun insists that even though Lin is young, he can still be useful, pointing out how polite he is and urging him to introduce himself. Lin greets Wei, who nods reluctantly, while Lin secretly notes that Yun not only fights well but also has her own bodyguard, making her a rare mix of strength, beauty, and wealth. Curious, he checks Wei's status window and sees a prompt warning that the man is skilled in boxing with high attributes, advising him to keep his distance. Lin thinks it makes sense for someone this tough to be a bodyguard, though the warning leaves him uneasy. Before he can ponder further, a booming voice interrupts as the ancient god appears once more, congratulating the chosen ones for grasping their situation but warning that they are untested by blood and fire and cannot yet call themselves warriors. The god declares that their first trial will be a dungeon crawl, where groups of 10 will be scattered across instances to battle monsters. Wei glances at Lin, silently judging him as a burden, while Lin himself is stunned, finding the task outrageous. Out of curiosity he peers at the god's stats, only to see no numbers, just a prompt declaring the being incomprehensibly powerful, though it surprisingly notes the god is female and even shows a friendly attitude toward him, likely due to his kept man talent. Shocked, Lin wonders if such a talent can really affect even an ancient god, yet he finds the possibility reassuring. Meanwhile, the god proclaims her mercy, promising that none of her chosen warriors will die in vain, though purple fumes rise around them as she clarifies that while death in the instance will not be permanent, the pain will feel every bit as real. With a chilling tone, she commands them to fight, eager to witness their performance. Lin finds himself laid on the ground, surrounded by a sticky spider web, with other participants murmuring nervously about how frightening it is, complaining about the insect theme. He notices that Yun and her bodyguard are in his group, realizing this could be complicated. At first, he thinks the fuss is overblown, it's just a spider cave, but then he sees crawling creatures emerging from the shadows and immediately understands why everyone is panicking. One man stomps a spider, trying to calm the group, insisting that humans, as apex predators with intelligence and teamwork, can handle even hundreds of spiders. Lin checks his status window and sees a prompt warning that one man nearby is slightly stronger than him and unlikely to pay attention unless he finds a way to pique his interest, but building a connection with him will be difficult. Suddenly the cave rumbles violently as stones burst from the floor, signaling the start of their first quest, a spider matriarch in its breeding session, highly aggressive. A warning explains that the monster has limited intelligence and will stop chasing them once they reach a designated area, though Lin knows real-world behavior will be far more dangerous. The cave's humidity suits the insects, and he suspects even bigger, fiercer creatures lie deeper inside. Participants murmur about entering together to avoid leaving anyone behind, while Lin reasons that a small team would be better for stealth and mutual support, though his youth and appearance make it unlikely anyone will heed his advice. He resolves to watch how things unfold, noting that charging recklessly might be terrifying, but since actual death is impossible here, there is little reason to fear. The ancient god announces that, as this is their first trial, Lin and the others receive a special prompt: enter the cave, fight with all their might to survive, and push deeper inside. But if they linger for more than a minute, the spider matriarch will strike directly. Murmurs ripple through the group as they complain about spiders and worry over what to do, some panicking about the danger, while one bold participant brandishes a hammer-like weapon, insisting there is no need to fear. Watching everyone begin to enter the narrow cave, Lin smiles to himself, reasoning that since death isn't real here, it is a chance to explore and test his limits. As the group moves inside, one remarks that there should be 10 people per the god's instructions, noticing only 9, and another dismisses Lin as weak, suggesting he stay at the rear since a child leading them would be dangerous. Lin trails behind, running his fingers along the cave wall and accidentally brushing against something slimy, the remnants of a spider. The men exchange tense words, realizing that at a life-or-death moment, every trick might be necessary, and they cannot underestimate anyone. Suddenly, from a side passage, a spider lunges toward a girl in front of Lin, slicing her neck, blood splattering across his face and hands. Shocked, he mutters to himself, staring at the fallen woman beneath the looming spider, thinking grimly that she had been taken down far too quickly. Everyone freezes in shock as the injured girl bleeds heavily on the ground, hesitation gripping the group. One man panics, suggesting they split up and run, only to be scolded by another who argues that scattering now would mean certain death. Amid their indecision, Lin stands calmly with a faint smile, thinking that he has no reason to worry about the others since he is the one directly facing the threat. He knows fleeing is unwise because showing his back to the enemy is a mistake, though he doubts he can harm the creature with mere stones. Weighing his options, he decides at least to attempt some form of self-defense. Lifting a heavy rock overhead, he checks the spider's prompt, and is stunned to see it marked as friendly. It is only a juvenile, weak but still capable of crushing him, and because it is female, his kept man talent has activated once more. Relieved, he marvels that this strange red talent works even on spiders, just as it had with the ancient god. Yet when he realizes the spider is trailing behind him, he panics, wondering if the talent has made it unusually attached to him. Considering a surprise attack, he raises the stone again, but upon meeting the spider's eyes he softens, finding it unexpectedly cute. Unable to strike, he tosses the stone aside, thinking it would be wrong to harm a creature that has shown no hostility, insisting to himself it is not affection but simple morality. As he moves forward, the spider follows closely, shadowing his steps. After a few minutes of observation, he concludes that although her strength and speed far surpass his own, she remains non-threatening. To test her, he hurls several stones ahead, watching in awe as the spider dashes effortlessly to intercept and scatter them aside, proving her remarkable agility. Lin studies the spider's attribute panel and notices she is only slightly weaker than Yun's bodyguard, and by comparing different panels he confirms the data is accurate. Her strength is nearly double his, and her agility is 3 times greater, meaning even if he attempted a sneak attack, he would likely lose. The spider is clearly stronger than humans, yet not to the point of instant killing. The girl earlier had died so quickly only because the creature struck first with hostility. From this, Lin realizes why the ancient god arranged the trial this way. If they are to become its warriors, their hands must inevitably be stained with blood. While strength, agility, and physique are simple to grasp, he wonders what mentality truly measures and why his own score is so high. Perhaps it comes from the invigorated man talent, but he briefly tests the idea by pointing at the spider and saying she is a pig, only for nothing to happen. Shaking his head, he decides not to overthink it. With the kept man talent shielding him, no spider monster seems inclined to attack, so he continues deeper into the cave, hoping someone else might awaken their potential and slay the threats ahead, giving him a chance to bond with them. But as he walks further, the sight grows grim. Bodies litter the ground, no signs of life among them. Behind him, countless spiders follow closely, and he realizes that out of their group of 10, nearly all are already dead. Just as he suspected, splitting up had only led them straight into danger. Lin jumps deeper into the cave and notices scattered remains of spider monsters, realizing that only the truly skilled can survive here. Among the debris, he spots the body of the man who had been leading their group. Though he died, he had managed to kill 2 spiders before falling, earning Lin's silent praise. Behind him, a full trail of spiders follows, yet Lin feels no fear. In fact, he considers that they might even help him navigate the cave. His kept man talent proves invaluable, keeping the spiders from attacking him as he ventures further. The cave stretches vast and seemingly endless, but in the distance, he notices something striking. In the center, perched atop a stone embedded in the wall, a queen spider with a distinctly female face lies over a treasure chest, commanding the space with an eerie, regal presence. The girl's eyes open, and the half-spider matriarch rises, holding a weapon in front of Lin. As he glances at her stat window, he sees she is labeled a common teen spider matriarch and marked as friendly. The prompt emphasizes that she is extremely friendly toward him, even suggesting she might want to take things further. Lin wonders if she is the ultimate boss of this panel, yet he knows his kept man talent is active, keeping her from attacking. The ancient god's mission had only required him to push deeper into the cave, not defeat the boss, so technically he has already completed the objective. Suddenly, he feels himself being pushed forward. Resisting, he notices the spiders lifting him, lying him down, and carrying him directly toward the matriarch. Lin thinks that while they may not be very smart, they have intentionally led him to her, wondering if they are setting him up with the boss, and jokes inwardly that he sees them as sisters, yet they seem to want him as their father. As he is positioned in front of the matriarch, the weapon in her hand disappears, and she approaches, introducing herself, prompting him to respond with his nickname, Little Mouse. She places a hand gently on his cheek, and he holds both her hands, marveling at how cold yet pleasant they feel, thinking desperately that he wishes she would speak so he could show off his silver tongue. Instead, she presses a finger to his lips, rips off his shirt, and he protests, warning her to think carefully about endangering herself and reminding her of the importance of safety and family. She silences him completely by binding his mouth, hands, and legs with spider whips, pinning him to the floor so tightly that he cannot even murmur, leaving him immobilized yet acutely aware of the intense, surreal situation unfolding around him. Lin now wears nothing but a zip of spider silk wrapped around his body, leaving only his face uncovered. He thinks his airs of innocence were about to be ruined, yet unexpectedly, she had stripped him only to personally clothe him in a garment made from her own silk. Fortunately, he hadn't expected much. Glancing behind, he sees her still there. The prompt has changed, fulfilling her greatest desire. She is now extremely happy, and the friendly level with her will no longer decrease. Lin wonders if her greatest desire really is just helping someone change clothes, finding it oddly simple. He thanks her profusely for the gift, asking how he might help clean her room as a token of appreciation, but she again silences him, gesturing toward a treasure chest. Concerned, he warns that leaving the item inside too long without airing could make it moldy and offers to help. Approaching the chest, he thinks this must be the only valuable thing here, hoping it won't disappoint. As he touches it, a voice resonates, marveling that someone could reach the end without killing a single monster and still earn a reward. Lin's eyebrows rise in surprise. He looks at the matriarch, who shows a spiderweb shirt she made, and from a circle, many spiders appear. The spider girls remain indifferent, leaving him to wonder if he alone can hear the ancient god's voice. Amazed at his own accomplishment, he credits the god's guidance and asks aloud if there will be an additional reward. The god's voice responds, congratulating him for achieving the theoretically impossible end-level reward. Excited, Lin asks if that means he can open the chest, and when he does, a burst of light forces him to shield his face. He thinks he might have received legendary golden gear from the ancient god. From the chest rises a book, prompting him to wonder what it is. The god's voice explains it is a golden class exchange, a tome of epic quality. Touch it to receive details and activate it with thought. Realizing the ancient god allows him to exploit shortcuts to gain additional benefits, he extends his hand to touch the book. Lin extends his hand to hold the book, and as he touches it, a radiant shine emerges, flooding his mind as if the content is transferring directly into him. He realizes this is the so-called class exchange tome, and although Kangaren may have recorded its contents like choosing a class in an online game, it only offers one option: Monster Contract Master. The name alone suggests he can enter contracts with monsters and have them serve him. The ritual is simple, but success requires one's mentality to surpass the other and for the other to offer no resistance. The book gives no origin story of the ancient god, the class, or the book itself. Only the skill is explained, leaving him without background information or guidance on how to cultivate further to contract multiple monsters. In battle, he can summon and control monsters with his mind to perform actions, and he notes with a wry thought that it resembles Pokemon, group fighting, truly despicable, yet fitting for him. While a true warrior might wield a giant sword, he prefers hiding behind his monsters and watching them tear apart opponents. The book opens in the middle and a screen appears asking if he would like to exchange his class. Lin thinks that from now on, he is no longer just a mortal and presses instant, accepting a role as a mortal who hides behind monsters. A faint yellow glow forms around him, and the sign in his hand illuminates as the class skills flow directly into him. He realizes that with a single thought, He can roughly gauge the difficulty of contracting the monster before him, and noticing the creatures are merely small spiders from the instance, he concludes their mentality is far weaker than his, making the contract easy and ensuring they will surrender to his charm. Lin turns around and is startled to see the boss standing right behind him, and because of his short height, his view of her is unusually clear. He politely asks if there is something she needs, but as she remains silent, he wonders what she is trying to convey until a screen above her suddenly displays easy. He freezes, realizing she is supposed to be the intense boss of this place, yet her contract difficulty is also marked as easy. With her mentality at 6 points, only 2 below his, he reasons that theoretically she should be far harder to contract than the common spiders with just 2 points, especially since her level and attributes far exceed his. Then it strikes him that the kept man's skill must be influencing this outcome, and he resolves that in the future, he will aim for matriarch-type monsters whose mentality is slightly weaker than his, while still gaining the benefit of their great strength. Speaking aloud, he asks the ancient god if, as a monster contract master, he can form a contract with his lady and take her away from this instance. Though no reply comes, he feels a pang of sympathy for her, trapped endlessly in this dark and suffocating place as its guardian, a loneliness he understands from his own childhood. He begins to say that being alone is not inherently bad, that he has already grown used to solitude, when suddenly the god's voice echoes, telling him this would not go against the rules. Overjoyed, he thanks the ancient god and raises 2 fingers, from which a faint yellow glow emerges. Declaring it is time to begin the contract, he resolves not to waste such a rare chance, especially with a powerful boss and the uncertainty of whether the next instance will even bring an opposite-sex monster. He tells her with conviction that from today onward she will no longer be alone, while in her thoughts she accepts, determined to fight alongside him and share the experiences of a brighter future. Lin extends his hand, and as the fingertips of both hands meet, a faint glow spreads from his hand, the air thickens, and the boss vanishes. He watches, confused, as a purple energy radiates downward and realizes that once the contract is formed, the monster's body hides directly in his shadow, allowing him to summon it with a single thought. A golden voice announces that the instance boss has disappeared and the instance will end in 1 minute, returning everyone to the original area. Lin deduces that his contract with the instance boss triggered the early ending, perhaps fulfilling the ancient god's intention for thorough exploration of the cave. Though he lacks enough clues to make a firm judgment, he notes that the spider matriarch's strength of 13 is more than double that of the expert, and her agility is 3 times superior, meaning no one should have an easier time completing tasks than him for now. Behind him, his shadow manifests, and perched on its shoulder is a cute spider. He senses the spider matriarch's presence, but she cannot detect his thoughts due to a one-way shield, as the god explained. With the instance concluded, teleportation begins, and Lin feels himself being pulled into the transition. Lin is teleported back, and not just him, every member who had ventured into the dungeon returns as well. The god announces that the beginner's quest has ended and that rewards for killing monsters will be credited to personal terminals as points. By thinking of the ancient god Agatha, a blue light screen appears, revealing each player's personal terminal where they can check basic attributes, point status, and task ranking. Some players get excited, comparing points, one boasting 10, another 11, and wondering how the points will be useful later. Lin watches them, but his panel hasn't appeared yet. The god explains that Agatha grants an hour to adapt or team up for the upcoming task. Lin thinks about forming a team and finally, his panel appears. Reading his stats, he grumbles that it looks like a knockoff of his game player skill and wonders if the ancient god respects intellectuals. From behind, Yun appears, holding his hand and asking if the instance was dangerous and whether he's hurt. He smirks, but immediately feels the spider matriarch's anger within him, realizing she can sense reality even while hidden in the shadow. He reassures himself that her favorability shouldn't drop, the contract is active, and there's no risk of losing control over her. Lin quickly lets go of Yun's hand, reminding her that the first mission's instance is specially adjusted with no casualties. Still, he decides not to anger her unnecessarily. Yun admits she was worried sick, and Lin laughs, noting that if he hadn't thought of helping his sister, he might have been eliminated immediately. Lin thinks that having more friends means more options. Yun is friendly and capable, so he can't just give up on her easily. She asks how many points he earned in the instance and complains that she cleared it but got none, realizing points only come from killing enemies, not completing tasks, and wonders why the system is so competitive, even with the ranking. Lin admits his score is 0 too, and she reassures him that being ranked over 3,000 still places him in the middle tier, showing the ancient god recognizes effort. He sighs, and she teases about Brother Wei, who actually ranked 10th. Lin wonders how that happened, and she explains she came to find him to bring him along, noting Wei not only earned many points but recruited followers, emphasizing that sticking together is essential for survival. She holds his hand and promises safety with siblings and allies around, while Lin notices that Han's stats are only slightly higher than Yun's, yet he earns so many points, likely using special tactics, which frustrates Yun, who fears she couldn't have saved herself alone. She decides to come with Lin to check it out. Wei and his group are on the side when Lin and Yun arrive, and Wei warns Yun that past identities and positions no longer matter, noting that in this world, only strength is reliable. Yun points at him angrily, accusing him of exploiting the weak to lure spiders for points, and he admits it was for performance but justifies it as using strength to gain more, claiming all are ready to follow him and telling Yun to be his woman. The statement shocks both Yun and Lin. Wei continues, declaring that under the ancient god, they will become the most capable subordinates, and that with the god's skills, they can gain benefits beyond imagination. Yun exclaims that she never expected him to turn out like this, questioning if men reveal their true nature once freed from societal rules and if a few hours in this brutal survival setting can make anyone embrace the concept of survival of the fittest. Seeing her anger, Lin holds her hand, reassuring her that it's only a few bad people and he won't become like that, while thinking Wei has grown very arrogant, unsure if he was always like this or if Yun was simply too trusting. Wei confronts Lin, mocking his 0 points and calling him a loser who survives only by pleasing women, claiming even in civilized society such people have little chance in this brutal world. Yun shouts at Wei for going too far, but he insists it's reality, claiming her strength could be useful if combined with his and criticizing her for being soft and slowing missions. She declares it has nothing to do with him and decides they must part ways, turning to leave. Wei grows angry, saying that with her talent and being the one he loves, he cannot let her go, his aura intensifying. She demands to know his intentions, reminding him this is the ancient god's main city where fratricide is forbidden. He counters that even with his strength, he can only secure 10th among 5,000, and with her strength combined, they could achieve far more. She refuses, insisting she won't be his stepping stone, but he presses on, claiming it's not her decision and that even if fratricide is forbidden, once it's done she will have to obey him. She snaps back, accusing him of having no shame. Yun grabs Lin's hand, shouting that they need to get out because Wei has gone completely crazy, and once they reach the main street, he won't dare to follow. From behind, Wei taunts that if she ran alone, she might make it, then charges at them, leaping forward and trying to kick them both, but they dodge easily. Yun says she could still escape but refuses to leave Lin behind, and Wei mocks her soft-heartedness, telling her caring for a loser is useless in this world. He orders his men to deal with Lin, and one hesitates, worried about punishment in the main city. Wei shrugs it off, saying a 0-pointer like Lin is not protected by the ancient god. Lin protests that attacking a kid is cruel, briefly considering summoning the spider matriarch to punish them, but 3 of Han's men close in, taunting him about his uselessness and mocking the pain he might feel. Wei holds Yun's shoulder, warning her she won't get past him and that they will learn what this world is like. Lin laughs inwardly, deciding he won't die without a fight, and raises 2 fingers, emitting a faint purple glow that summons the spider matriarch. She grips her weapon, Lin warns her to prepare, and the men panic at the sight of the fearsome creature from the instance, trying to flee, but the spider matriarch stands firm, attacking with overwhelming force. A massive blast erupts, and Lin notes there's no punishment for dealing with the minions, turning his focus to the big boss, vowing not to let him escape. The spider matriarch looms before them, leaving everyone frozen in shock except Lin, while Wei reels in disbelief, wondering why such a monster is here and if it actually aids Lin in killing people. He realizes her human form combined with monstrous strength and speed far surpasses the spiders in the instance, and admits to himself he cannot compete. Dropping to his knees, he bows and pleads, claiming he was blinded before, begging for mercy and asking to be spared. Lin studies him calmly, thinking his flexibility and quick adaptation could make him a dangerous opponent later. Wei stammers again, saying Lin is not a loser but truly powerful, and asks that his past words be treated as nonsense. Desperately, he turns to Yun, reminding her of how he once helped her catch thieves and carried her bags, but she is in no mood to listen. She drives her fist into his face, shouting for him to shut up, furious at his shamelessness, calling him arrogant, lowly, and disgusting, and saying it frustrates her to remember how she once trusted him. She declares that true men face death bravely, while his groveling only makes him repulsive. Lin watches in admiration, impressed by how she topples the towering, muscular man with a single blow, recognizing her strength, straightforward nature, and kindness as proof that having her as a partner in this world is invaluable. Yun then steps toward him, apologizing for her earlier misjudgment that placed him in danger, but Lin reassures her not to blame herself, and she insists she had already resolved to help him escape no matter what, though thankfully it is no longer needed. Yun turns to Han, asking Lin what he intends to do with him, and Lin replies that someone as adaptable, ambitious, and cunning as Wei cannot be safely kept around. Wei quickly begs for mercy, swearing that without the spider he stands no chance. Lin then notices his profile prompt flashing, revealing that while Wei pleads outwardly, deep inside he still schemes about crushing him one day. Almost as if reading his thoughts, the spider steps forward, weapon in hand, and Wei stumbles back in panic, shouting for her not to come closer. Yun wonders if Lin truly means to kill him, but as she recalls his earlier murderous intent, she admits she has no grounds to intervene. Though she feels sorrow that someone she once knew has fallen so far, she resigns herself to the truth, blaming the ancient god for twisting men into devils. Seeing her sadness, Lin speaks gently, saying Wei has already been punished by her strike and looks genuinely repentant, so perhaps they should let things go. Wei feels relief wash over him, but before he can fully breathe, the spider refuses to relent, her weapon still raised. Lin quickly cries out, calling to the spider to stop and addressing Han, explaining that the contract binds her to automatically strike anything that harbors intent to harm him, and he cannot restrain her. Wei drops to his knees again, frantically pleading that it is all a misunderstanding, swearing that he has no killing intent toward Lin and begging desperately for his life. The spider lifts her blade high, and Lin thinks coldly that Wei should just reunite with his fallen followers. But before the strike can land, a guard steps forward, commanding that within this space, no warrior may harm another. Lin's eyes catch the prompt on the guard, assuring him that despite already breaking this rule, the guard's friendly stance will keep him safe from punishment. He reflects in silence, realizing he had already slain 3 without interference, and it seems this favorable attitude truly shields him. Han, trembling, seizes the chance to cry out that as warriors of the ancient god, they should not fight one another, loudly proclaiming his eternal loyalty. Lin grows irritated at his shameless display and thinks it might be useful to test the extent of the god's restrictions on him. Just as the spider's strike descends, an overwhelming force halts her in place, freezing her before the statue of the god. A divine voice echoes, repeating the decree that ancient gods' warriors must not harm each other. Wei shakes so violently that he wets himself, then jeers at the immobilized spider, mocking how powerful she seemed only moments ago. He shouts a plea to the great Agatha Nicholas, declaring that Lin has already killed 3 fellow warriors in a row and demands divine punishment fall upon him. Lin remains calm, noting that the restraint applied only to the spider, not to him directly, and though the rule is strict, the god's friendly attitude leaves him unharmed for now, assuring no immediate danger despite Han's outburst. Little Mouse watches Lin uneasily, thinking he clearly lacks full control over the spider monster, and wondering if he will still be alright. Wei raises his voice to the ancient god, insisting that even if Lin did not personally kill the 3, the spider cannot be excused and must be eliminated before more lives are lost. Inwardly, Wei feels this turn of events as fortune in disguise, thinking that without the spider's protection Lin will no longer dare act so proud, and while killing is forbidden, there are still countless ways to deal with him. Lin calmly explains to the god that he had been unaware of the rules and that it was Han's killing intent that triggered the spider's attack. After a moment of silence, the divine voice responds, declaring that from now on the rule forbidding warriors from harming each other will be strictly enforced. Wei cries out in disbelief, furious that punishment does not fall on Lin, wondering how his luck could be so absurd and cursing him as a cheater who even commands a monster. Lin approaches the spider and assures her that no one will be harmed anymore, asking her to return. She fades into shadow and slips back inside him, leaving Yun stunned by the sight. Lin reassures her that thanks to the god's rules, they are safe, but Wei seethes in frustration, unable to accept that Lin walks free with 3 of his men dead and the spider still by his side. He protests loudly to the god, demanding fairness for the sake of controlling thousands of warriors, but his words are cut short when a blinding energy crashes down from above, searing his body. Lin and Yun shield themselves from the shockwave as Wei collapses to the ground, charred and trembling. Yun stares in shock and asks why the god would strike him, and Lin dryly suggests it might simply be because he is too ugly. Checking Han's profile, he reads that his dissatisfaction with the god's decree led to this casual punishment, though he was fortunate to survive. Lin realizes Wei still refuses to give up, but then the god's voice resounds one final time, warning all warriors again that harm among them is forbidden. With that, the divine presence fades, and Lin swears to himself that once outside this space, he will kill freely, rules or no rules. Yun stares at him seriously and asks what the spider monster truly is, wondering if he is the one controlling it. Lin admits with honesty that in the last trial it was only by sheer luck that the spider accepted him as her master. He explains he had never wished to kill anyone and only wanted to run, but he could not abandon Yun after her kindness and felt he must protect her no matter the cost. That was why he called the spider to his side. Hearing this, Yun takes his hand gently and reassures him not to be afraid, saying he has done nothing wrong, for their deaths were the result of their own choices, and even the ancient god had not punished him. He asks if that means they truly brought it upon themselves, while Yun silently reflects that he had acted for her sake and was forced into summoning the spider. She remembers her promise to protect him, yet things unfolded this way, and he quietly hopes she will not see him as someone with a dark heart. Just then, the booming voice of the ancient god echoes above, declaring that while death may sometimes be pardoned, sins of the living cannot be escaped, and those who violated the rules will now face punishment. Lin freezes in shock as a faint glow envelopes his body, and before Yun can reach him, he vanishes from sight. Panic floods her as she realizes he is gone, her heart racing with fear, whispering to herself that she never imagined it would come to this, praying desperately that he will somehow be safe. Lin crashes hard onto the ground, sweat dripping as he gasps for breath, thinking how truly unpredictable the ancient god is, first claiming not to pursue, then suddenly punishing. The spider helps him to his feet, and he keeps thinking he must be more careful from now on. Though his body is fine, the shock is too much. He doubles over, coughing violently, before turning to gently stroke the spider, thanking her softly and saying she has suffered as well, staying inside with him all that time, wondering how he could manage without her. Looking around, confusion spreads as he mutters about Yun, realizing she is gone too, and at the mention of her name, the spider reacts with clear displeasure. Suddenly, the mighty voice of the ancient god echoes, addressing the warriors, declaring that before the first official mission is revealed, one more matter must be explained. All are told to listen closely, reminded of the panel feature that introduced the existence of instance points. These points, the god explains, are the key to measuring performance within each instance, with calculation varying by mission, and for this first trial, points are earned only by defeating monsters. In this place, money no longer holds value. Everything, whether common necessities or rare treasures, must be exchanged for points. Observing the social habits of humans, the god has allowed points to be transferred freely between individuals through simple thought confirmation, hoping they will use this wisely. He explains that the building before them functions as the shopping space, the permanent headquarters that will serve as residence, supply station, and the departure hub for every mission. Yet, even within this area, potential dangers remain, so caution must not be abandoned. Then the god announces the mission, revealing they are to set out into one of the countless realms, a strange and unknown world unlike any they have ever seen. The life forms, their strength, their very shapes, and even the laws that govern those worlds will all differ from anything they have ever known. The ancient god continues, declaring that from this place their mission will begin, and in this phase they must move steadily deeper, gathering knowledge about the world while hunting to survive. Points for this stage will be split into two categories, exploration and hunting, and after enduring for a set period, each will also receive basic survival points. Yet the god warns against idleness, making it clear that those who fail to earn any hunting or exploration points within 48 hours will be forcibly eliminated. A shiver spreads among the warriors, many questioning why such harsh rules are necessary. But the god's voice cuts through their fear, reminding them that in this world there is no such thing as resurrection, that every experience here is real and irreversible. Still, he claims mercy, granting 3 hours for the warriors to rest and prepare before the outer barrier opens and the mission truly begins. Whether for resupply or recovery, they are urged to use this short window wisely. With that, the crowd stirs, some voicing excitement as they rush forward, eager to see what can be obtained. The heavy vault door swings open, revealing a glowing portal leading to a vast exchange hall. One murmurs in wonder about what treasures might lie in the gear section, especially spatial equipment, while another remarks confidently that he knows the system and plans to redeem a primordial grenade. Lin watches, thinking how familiar this point mall setup feels, yet unlike before, he has no points at all. Without them, he cannot exchange for anything, and in this world where a single misstep means real death, the lack of resources gnaws at his confidence. Later, he wanders into a quiet alley where Wei sits tending to his burns with rough bandages. Lin eyes him with a faint smirk, thinking that even if he runs out of options, there is always a backup plan. He can simply make someone else provide the points. After all, it is not so hard, especially with someone like Brother Han. Han jumps up, yelling Lin's name as he storms forward, but the spider instantly steps between them, her aura radiating a crushing weight that halts him in place. Lin raises a hand calmly, telling him to relax, claiming he only came to talk about what just happened. Wei snaps back, demanding what nonsense he is spouting, admitting the spider rattled him earlier but reminding that the ancient god forbids them from harming each other. Yet before his words settle, the spider launches silk that slams him against the wall, binding him tight. Wei thrashes, shouting in panic, urging Lin to talk it out, insisting everything can be negotiated. His thoughts race, damn it, so he figured it out too. Even without direct harm, being trapped here means elimination by the god. Desperate, he coughs and offers another path, saying he has nothing left except a pile of points, which Lin happens to need, so he is willing to contribute some as apology. Lin smirks, noting aloud that while it was not his original plan, Han's idea is actually quite good, inwardly amused that Wei guessed his intentions. He then demands all of Han's points in exchange for settling past grievances, the words striking Wei like a blade. Wei protests, shouting that taking everything is the same as robbing outright. No, worse, he is actually robbing, and insists he can give at most 5 points since he needs some to survive. If stripped bare, he argues, he might as well be killed since no one without points can make it through. At his defiance, the spider begins circling, measuring him with strands of silk, her eerie focus tightening the air. Lin's prompt flashes a warning not to be fooled, explaining that Wei has never abandoned his grudge and remains consumed with the thought of revenge, no matter what he promises now. Lin sizes him up, deciding it is just bluff. He speaks again with a chilling edge, saying it is not that he refuses to let Wei go, but rather that his spider sister has taken a peculiar interest in him. Without enough points, Lin cannot buy the gear needed to restrain her, and if denied, she will surely turn Wei into her prey. He points out how she is already sizing him up with her silk, ready to bind his body into a living doll, for it is in the very nature of spider monsters to convert their enemies into puppets they control at will. Wei grows restless, snapping that perhaps even the ancient god will overlook this, since a puppet made by the spider is still alive and not truly dead. He warns that if not for him keeping her in check, the spider would have acted already, and once she does, no one will hear Lin's screams and no amount of bleeding will bring help. He adds grimly that even if he wanted to save him then, it would cost more points than he could afford, so surely Lin understands what he means. His eyes flick nervously toward the spider, who now weaves silk into the shape of a dress and playfully displays a shirt, smiling as if to suggest she would like to see him wear it. Han's mind instantly paints the picture of himself trapped in that garment, body enslaved as her puppet, and dread consumes him. Shaking, he blurts out that if Lin drains him completely, he will not survive either and would sooner take his own life, leaving Lin with nothing. He bargains desperately, saying he will give 80, no more, not a single point beyond that. Lin checks the prompt, confirming Han's panic is genuine and that he is on the edge of suicide. Cutting him off entirely would only backfire. Lin finally nods and says that 80 it is, urging him to hand it over. With no choice, Wei transfers the points, and the system instantly notifies Lin that 80 points have been moved from Han, asking if he accepts. Lin thinks eagerly that of course he will, why would he ever refuse? He confirms without hesitation, the screen flashing his choice, and at last he considers the mission complete, his first gains secured. The mall is divided into 4 sections: gear, equipment, tombs, and potions. Items for sale come in only 2 grades, the common white and the excellent blue, while anything of higher quality must be discovered elsewhere. The gear section carries essentials like food, medicine, and survival tools, while the equipment section offers weapons and armor, some with magical effects. The tombs section provides class exchange tools and skill books, which grant class skills upon use. The potion section contains only one type of item, the Level Up Breakthrough Potion. Each section is neatly organized on shelves by price. Crowds surge at the cheaper shelves, people pushing as though they are fighting for scraps, though these white and blue items look flimsy and of limited use. Some complain that 3 hours is plenty to prepare, and that since the ancient god allows unlimited gear exchanges, rushing now is foolish. Spending points blindly without knowing what awaits in exploration risks wasting resources. Others argue differently, pointing out the cleverness of sweeping out gear and trading it later, using points for exchanges during exploration as if carrying a Doraemon pocket. Though temporary and limited to 5 swaps, it should be enough to handle one round. With the supply issue settled, the focus shifts to strengthening oneself, so attention turns to the potion and tomb sections. Lin heads toward the tomb shelves, recalling the class exchange tomb he picked up earlier, and finds the layout confirming his hunch. The section is divided into warrior, mage, and priest, but his monster contract master class is nowhere to be seen. The thought strikes that he may possess a hidden class, making his tomb worth far more than the usual 200 points, considering even the cheapest white-grade tomb is priced that high. Smiling at his fortune, he opens his stat window and clicks on the class scale. The top row shows only level 0 monster contract technique. Unlocking the next slot requires level 1, which would also provide a skill point. That point could then be used to add a new skill or enhance his existing contract technique, raising it to level 1 and allowing him to control 2 monsters. Below, the general skill slots remain empty, each requiring purchase of corresponding common skills to activate. Unlike class skills, which unlock automatically with leveling after class acquisition, general skills demand points to exchange and must be equipped manually. Lin notices a shelf marked for level 0, offering only general skill books. These are basic training techniques tied to the 4 major attributes, with their names kept simple. The instructions state that once a training spell is equipped, it cannot be removed, and no 2 spells of the same attribute and quality can be used at the same time. After equipping, the body automatically begins exercising and gradually improves the chosen attribute, though actively training speeds up the process. A white-grade forging technique can raise an attribute by 3 points, while a blue-grade can raise it by 4, which seems limiting. Remembering the potion section, Lin recalls the Level Up Breakthrough Potion instructions. Reaching 9 points in an attribute is the cap, and surpassing it requires the potion to break through to the next level. With each breakthrough, the attribute limit rises by 1 point, and the performance increase is more significant compared to earlier upgrades. Lin considers his unique advantage, having started with 8 points in mentality. Using a white quality technique could push it to 9, followed by a breakthrough potion to reach the next stage. However, even after level 1, combining different techniques would only allow his mentality to rise to 17, still short of what is required for level 2, which feels frustratingly low. Watching a poor man nearby with all attributes at 1, Lin realizes simply hoarding points would not help him level either, meaning there must be other ways to boost attributes hidden in treasure chests earned through special tasks. His class skill lets him contract monsters weaker than himself, while the captain's skill can charm those stronger, so he resolves to focus solely on upgrading mentality while keeping his other attributes low to maintain a weak but highly mental build. Deciding, he spends 20 points on a level 0 white-grade mentality training book. Though unimpressive, it is enough to give him a small push toward leveling. Once purchased, the training begins, and he feels his mentality slowly strengthen. Some yoga-like poses surface in his mind, and he realizes meditating actively amplifies the effect. Just then, a voice calls out behind him. A man greets politely, introducing himself as Jingqi and handing over a business card. Lin accepts the card from the man and, seeing it labeled as real estate, wonders what business it could be when caught up in the ancient god's game. The man admits it is just an old habit, and explains he is actually inviting him to join a team, stressing that cooperation raises their chance of survival since death on a mission is final. Lin replies that he is with his sister and does not need to plan further, though he acknowledges the benefits of a team. Before he can finish, another man interrupts, telling the first to leave him alone if he is not interested. Recognizing the newcomer, Zhang Qi steps back, noting it is Captain Lu and asking if he too seeks to recruit this young man. Lin reflects that there is no true order here, only shifting alliances and hidden threats. Zhang Qi waves politely, suggesting they still collaborate in the future despite not teaming up. Lin considers his own path, knowing his body is weak and his rare talent cannot be used recklessly, and unreliable teammates could be disastrous. He thanks Captain Lu for stepping in, who dismisses it as nothing. Realizing Lu might be the same top 5 ranked Lu Chichi, Lin checks his panel and confirms it. Lu introduces himself, and Lin follows suit, noticing Lu has 3 attributes under training, meaning he exchanged 3 skill books at once, an unusual feat. Lin then asks why Zhang Qi was after him, suspecting it was to trick him for points, and Lu explains it was more about selecting valuable teammates, noting Lin's youth and potential compared to others. Lu reveals his team already numbers more than 50 members, the strongest in overall strength, and says he seeks someone with leadership qualities to help lead. Lin sees a prompt describing Lu's charisma, how in under an hour he gathered over 50 people, but also warns of subtle same-sex repulsion, urging caution. Though tempted, Lin decides it is not reliable, telling Lu he must discuss with his sister first and leaving. He reflects that once he clung to the strong out of weakness, but with the spider matriarch, going solo and grinding points is no worse than joining weaker groups. As he departs, Lu assures there will always be a place for him as an officer. Han, watching from the side, approaches Lu, praising Lin's potential but secretly fearing his own position would be threatened if Lin joined. He thinks he must speak carefully. Lu replies that Lin is just an inexperienced youth relying on his sister, not worth forcing, but he notices friction between them. Wei admits there were small misunderstandings yet vows to submit if Lin joins, though he worries Lin would not forgive later once stronger. Lu, holding an excellent blue gauntlet and sword, reassures him, saying he will mediate any conflict since both are important to the team, reminding Wei he has the highest attribute after himself. He gives Wei the gear, explaining they were bought collectively to boost combat power, and expects him to contribute significantly to the mission. Wei accepts, remarking that the strong protect the weak and the wealthy lift the poor, while inwardly acknowledging that focused resources accelerate his growth far beyond what he could achieve alone. Clutching the weapons, he thinks Lin is formidable only because of his spider monster, and once he gains enough points to exchange for powerful gear and strike directly, his revenge will finally come, no matter how long it takes. As Lin walks out, he thinks it feels strange to keep calling her sister Spider, so since she often chirps, he decides to name her Little Chirp Sister. At once she appears and hugs him tightly, and he tells her not to get too excited since luckily no one else is around. She then points toward the door where Yoon is approaching, and as she appears, Chirp vanishes. Yoon greets him, saying she has been waiting, and he asks why she is still here. She explains it is to apologize for Wei and also to give him something, asking for his hand. Extending it, he says he needs no apology, but she insists a gift and an apology are not the same, this one coming from a sister to a brother. She hands him an amulet, explaining it can block a fatal injury and warns that no amount of caution is excessive in the unknown. He recognizes the gear, knowing it costs 40 points, and wonders if she has left any for herself. Confused, he hears her say she still has things to do and asks him to stay safe. Trying to read her stat window, he sees she intends to use all her points on him, even without warm feelings, simply out of guilt, and he wonders what kind of rare, foolish woman acts this way in such a world. Chirp returns, holding his hand and patting his head, and he decides that since people like her are so rare, they must help her someday and ensure she owes them a great favor, something sustainable for the future. With that, he tells Chirp it is time to move, and she readies her weapon. The countdown begins, voices rise as the timer ticks down, and the guard's voice declares preparation time over. Warriors are told that entering unexplored lands will disperse the fog of folly, earn exploration points, and that hunting tasks will be issued at random, rewarding points as well. He urges them to fight and struggle, as every battle will only make them stronger. The barrier fades, and the crowd rushes forward shouting with excitement. Some enhanced fighters compete fiercely for points, while others fall back, knowing they cannot rival the elites. Looking at Lin with his slight frame, some mock him as a weakling with short arms and legs, dismissing his chances among them. As Lin pretends to move diligently, others mock him, saying the vanguard will eat meat, those behind might sip soup, but he will only choke on dust. They laugh, convinced he cannot catch up and will be left far behind, while reassuring themselves that the map is vast and with the stronger ones spreading ahead, they too will get chances to light up areas and earn exploration points. Lin, unfazed, pauses and decides that since no one is around, it is time to begin properly. He calls Chirp, who emerges and lifts him into her arms, and at his signal she dashes forward with astonishing speed. Observers watching the map are baffled, some suspecting a bug as a path lights up too quickly, while others realize it is genuine exploration though no points are awarded to them. Soon it becomes clear that the sudden trail belongs to Lin. Chirp then climbs a tall tree with him, giving a wide view of the land. Lin notes that after running 5 kilometers they gained only a single point, far less than he expected, and still no monsters have appeared. He wonders if the safety zone near the base is simply too large, or if the ancient god intends to warn them of formidable beasts ahead. Looking out over the vast terrain, he realizes the mission will not be brief and that survival in the wild, not just fighting monsters, must be carefully considered. Sitting on the trail deep in thought, Lin reflects that thanks to the spider merchant's speed, he has already made it this far on the first day, yet aside from 10 exploration points he has not seen a single hunting mission. With 200 points needed to redeem a level 0 breakthrough potion, relying solely on exploration would be endless. His gaze falls on a band of forest goblins below, common weaklings of fantasy lore who lounge idly without caution, practically inviting an ambush. Though they are easy prey, he tells himself that as a contract master who values strength, he refuses to stoop to such disgrace. Just then, a notification appears. Hunting mission cleared, forest goblin camp ahead, reward 5 points, special rule grants an extra 5 for a successful ambush. Surprised by the incentive, he changes his stance and orders Chirp that even a lion uses its full strength against a rabbit, so wasting such a chance is unthinkable. She agrees and swiftly descends, striking the goblins while they feast. Panic erupts as she slashes through them, forcing them to flee, and Lin urges her not to let any escape, thrilled by the steady flow of points. At this rate, just 17 more hunts will be enough for a potion. The display shows 0.30 of 200 mentality and cultivation experience at 5.6%. Chirp leaps high, weaving a massive silk whip that encases most of the goblins, and when one slips through she seizes him with her weapon and finishes him off. Lin feels the fight was simple and thinks it best to leave quickly, but suddenly a horn sounds, followed by a thunderous shout. His eyes widen as more and more goblins rush in, reinforcements arriving far too quickly, some of them armed with bows ready to fire. Lin watches the armed forest goblins pour in, noting that unlike the lazy ones before, these fighters are hardened, their attributes bolstered by hours of training each day. A prompt flashes in their chat window boasting of their relentless regimen, which irritates him but also makes clear that these ones can actually harm the spider merchant. He thinks quickly. If he climbs down now and gets spotted, he becomes a target, yet if the spider merchant carries him off, they'll only draw more attention. Considering luring the goblins away and recalling her later, he discards the plan, knowing the horn might have summoned countless reinforcements already. More figures emerge, none of them slackers, leaving him to wonder if he's stirred up an entire hive of professionals. Desperate, he consults his watch for gear recommendations to ensure a safe retreat. The assistant responds, generating a list. The first is a hidden mist smoke pot, costing 10 points to activate, which triggers in 5 seconds, shrouding a 100-meter radius in thick fog for a full minute, allowing cover for escape or ambush. Lin muses it would suit an attack since Chirp could still sense through the mist. But another option catches his eye, a one-time teleportation scroll. Costing only 2 points, it requires 10 seconds to activate before whisking a person up to a kilometer away to safety. He decides instantly. Ordering the assistant to redeem it, he clutches the scroll in hand as the purchase completes. Shouting for Chirp to endure just a little longer, he activates the scroll, and as the countdown finishes, light engulfs them both. In the next moment, Lin and Chirp vanish, teleported far from the swarm. As Lin and Chirp landed safely from the teleportation, he exhaled deeply, relieved that luck had placed them somewhere without immediate danger. Chirp hugged him from behind, and he told her it was good they both arrived together, adding that retreating when necessary is not cowardice but wisdom, as avoiding needless losses is the mark of a brave person. He thought how fortunate it was they pulled back in time, since the spider merchant only bore light injuries that did not hinder her combat strength. With a wry thought, he muttered that while a man's revenge might take years, a spider's vengeance comes far sooner, and he would eventually repay what had been done. For now, he opened the map to confirm their location and was surprised to find they had been dropped into a completely different area. He noticed the region where the goblins had been was still shrouded in darkness, leading him to wonder if there were hidden conditions tied to illuminating the map. Remembering how the ancient god declared that exploration points were distributed according to his own standards without detailing them, Lin reasoned there must be obscure laws guiding how the map lit up. Such mystery, he thought, was natural for a being beyond comprehension, whose power itself seemed bound by rules mortals could not guess. As his thoughts lingered, the boundless power trigger flared within him, and catching sight of a distant blaze, he resolved aloud to head toward the inferno and continue exploring in that direction. Lin and Chirp crouched behind the trees overlooking what was clearly goblin territory, the stronghold's defenses looking frail after most of its main force had already been lured away. Lin whispered that this was the perfect moment to strike, remarking that he never allowed revenge to wait overnight. A prompt appeared on the screen stating that the forest goblin frontline base lay poorly defended and instructing him to destroy it as much as possible, with rewards increasing based on the level of destruction. He smirked, thinking the mission aligned perfectly with his plans since he intended to spend points on a large move anyway. Now he could claim vengeance and rack up points in one sweep. Remembering the hundreds of goblins who had poured in from every direction earlier, he deduced that this stronghold alone could not have housed them all, meaning other bases must exist elsewhere. Still, he told himself, even low-quality gear had its value if used properly. Pulling out a canister labeled common-grade incendiary gel, he noted that once the fuse was lit and the container thrown, it would erupt into fierce flames within 5 seconds, with a single point redeemable for 10 units. Turning to Chirp, he told her that her unmatched agility made her perfect for the task, urging her to fully exploit her speed advantage, and began explaining the finer points of spreading fire as part of their raid. Flames tore through the forest as goblin bases burned through the night, the once hidden strongholds reduced to blazing ruins under a roaring inferno. To the goblins, the culprit appeared only as a vague, fleeting shadow, a purple figure slipping away into the darkness before they could grasp its form. By the next day, Lin had already set 5 bases alight in succession, netting 30 points after deducting the cost of incendiary gel and raising his total to 68. Pleased with the haul, he figured a few more runs like this would bring him close to exchanging for an upgrade potion, perhaps even tomorrow. Yet he knew this wave of destruction enraged the forest goblin soldiers, who were now tracking his trail with reckless determination, making that territory too dangerous to tread for now. He noted how the lit-up areas on the map seemed free of goblins, providing relative safety, and decided it was the right time to lay low, telling Chirp that their retreat was all part of a strategy to lure enemies while still securing missions and points. Just then, Chirp stiffened at a sound, her expression tightening. When he asked what she noticed, the answer came clear as the Captain Lu team emerged nearby. Hiding behind a tree, Lin realized her reaction was because Wei was among them, the old fighter now allied with others. Checking his stats, a prompt revealed that after tasting the benefits of pooled team resources, Wei had already charted his long-term path, following the saying of 30 years east of the river, 30 years west. Lin thought the method of concentrating points into a few individuals truly showed its power, since even without instant leveling, equipment and attributes could be stacked to near upgrade strength. Wei then stepped forward, shouting to watch him, and with a swift slash cut down a leaping goblin in a single blow, the attack amplified by a level 0 skill combined with special gear and boosted attributes, moving faster even than Chirp herself. Lin knew there was no need for a prompt. People like that couldn't be left around. Captain Luce's team assured their main group would complete the exploration task fully, earning points and distributing them fairly afterwards so everyone could grow stronger. Meanwhile, Wei mused that fair distribution was not the same as equal distribution, and as the main combatant, he would naturally gain more points. Stronger gets stronger, he thought, and after this mission, he planned to exchange 100 points for a monster-repelling weapon to combine with his chain blade and flying slash, easily taking down Lin and the spider monster. He also plotted to carve Lin piece by piece, leaving Chirp for later. Before he could act further, a sudden strike grazed his neck. It was Chirp. Wei fell, stunned, as Luce shouted in confusion, questioning if this was a spider monster. The team panicked, unable to comprehend such a strong creature existing in the wild, and even Luce realized that despite Han's enhancements, he was no match for this monster. Chirp vanished as she locked eyes with Luce, who barked that no matter the monster's origin, killing his team member was unacceptable. Seeing the chaos, the team praised Luce, feeling safe with the captain present, while Luce internally breathed relief that the monster left on its own, barely steady on his legs, the entire group shaken and frightened, hoping a bit of tough talk could rally their morale. The exploration began as goblins charged toward the people. One man clenched his teeth and, turning quickly, struck the leg of a girl, making her fall so he could use her as bait to escape. He justified it to himself, thinking the monster would no longer chase him, while the girl cried out at his betrayal. He shouted back about the burdens his family had suffered to meet dowry demands, insisting he needed to survive and break free from the constraints of reality to stand out in this strange world. Yet his plan failed, as another goblin leapt at him, and from behind, the woman screamed, condemning him as despicable. Neither of them survived, both falling to the goblins. Lin sat on the ground while Chirp attacked the goblins, noting that areas previously explored were now unsafe as the forest goblin army had invaded. Following the ancient god's instructions, Lin realized these tasks were far from trivial. If the forest goblin force was not stopped, most people would be trapped in the safe zone and die within 48 hours from a lack of points. As a strong lone wolf, he could only attempt a desperate defense, earning points to survive while the massive goblin army squeezed through. From behind, Chirp called him, holding one goblin in her hands, and Lin read its prompt, which noted that goblin meat was rich in protein, tasting like crispy chicken, but consuming it could bring great terror. Lin was baffled by the warning, having seen countless battles and anomalies, confident nothing could fool him. Just as Chirp opened the goblin's mouth to eat it, Lin shouted, telling her to hold back and not eat it. I was not scared by some great terror. It all came from the heart. Forming a contract with a spider meant I did not need to eat as long as I provided her with magic power. Surviving in the wild only required feeding myself. I had expected wild animals or fruits in the forest, but all I found were forest goblins. My bread was finished, leaving me reliant on my shopping assistant. I ordered it to suggest wilderness survival food, and a voice acknowledged, beginning a search. It suggested dragon liver and phoenix gill, both of excellent quality but worth immense points. I interrupted, saying stop, under 5 points, cheaper the better. The voice complied, showing a low-quality filling potion that allowed a player to go 10 days without food, with minor side effects that were harmless. I calculated that 2 months would cost 30 points, knowing saving points was hard but necessary to advance. I considered a seemingly useless skill I still had. Meanwhile, others were complaining about spending points on the same low-quality potion, calling it nauseating and a waste. As they argued, they noticed me collecting herbs from the ground. One muttered, "Is he really thinking of eating grass?" Too sad. I began eating it, but my thresh skill made even grass taste supremely delicious, and I could digest it easily. I dug in, devouring it like a man possessed, prompting another to mutter about competing with such a freak. Later, with Chirp's help, we defeated many goblins, and a screen announced the mission to eliminate a squad of regular forest goblin soldiers was complete, rewarding 20 points. I realized all my efforts in monitoring goblin movements had paid off, identifying the best time and place for an ambush. I had even arranged with a spider merchant to set various web traps to restrict the goblins' movements. These regular soldiers were strong and coordinated, but Chirp put in immense effort to wipe them out, getting battered in the process. She stepped forward again, determined to finish the task. Lin laughed, telling little Chirp's sister that a minor injury like that was nothing and he would leave the cleanup to her, glancing at her cuts and bruises. Reading her prompt, he saw that facing organized regular forest goblin soldiers was already straining the spider merchant, and as her contract master, he could give her a boost. Lin thought that at level 1 it was already difficult for her to maintain an advantage, with only 2 options: contract more monsters as helpers or enhance her strength, though the effect of future class skills was still unknown. He had saved 300 points, but his mentality attribute had not yet reached its full potential. Then a faint glow surrounded him, and a screen displayed his stats, prompting that his mentality had reached the level 10 limit, and warning that failing to upgrade now would waste training time. Lin reflected that his recent meditation had not been in vain, and now he could use the level up portion, though only 3 purchase quotas remained in the store. Considering the few days' journey ahead, he decided Little Chirp could carry him back in half a day, so they returned to level up. In the store, with no one else around, Lin no longer needed to hide Little Chirp. He took a blue excellent quality portion, noting that it was a level up portion costing 200 points and had to be consumed in one go. As he gulped it down, he felt a change: faster thinking, sharper gaze, heightened senses, and a tighter connection with his monster. He even sensed Little Chirp's mood. She was bored and eager to continue fighting forest goblins. Lin realized that mentality improvement involved not just intelligence but perception and intuition, and that skill points from leveling up could now be used to improve class skills or unlock new ones. He considered upgrading the monster contract technique to handle multiple monsters but decided that with a powerful matriarch like the spider merchant, it was better to invest in a new skill. He upgraded a common skill, and the screen displayed boost morale level 0. As a monster contract master, he could use mentality power to connect with a contracted monster, inspiring them to enhance combat power, granting 1 point of strength and agility to a designated monster. Lin noted that this class skill, tied to forming contracts, was significant and would improve with leveling, allowing him to maintain the spider merchant's strength even if her attributes plateaued. Level 0 mentality training would soon be replaced by level 1, so he decided to spend 60 of his remaining 100 points on a blue excellent quality training technique, which felt much more effective than the white common quality version. The leftover points could be exchanged for gear. Lin then focused on adjusting the spider matriarch's mood, telling Little Chirp she must be eager and ready to continue fighting forest goblins, which made her visibly excited. So many goblins were sleeping when Lin approached, thinking the first thing to do after leveling up was to test his newfound strength on a forest goblin. Forest goblins usually moved in groups, and a chaotic brawl wouldn't be suitable for experimenting with his skills, but luck was on his side when he spotted a lone goblin. Chirp immediately started defeating the others, and from behind, Lin told her to leave the last one to him. Pushing herself back, he walked toward the remaining goblin, greeting it casually, and the goblin grabbed its hammer, sprinting toward him while shouting. Lin quickly formed a protective barrier, and when the goblin struck, it was stunned. He thought about the multifunction defense orb, which cost 40 points and could defend against most attacks, each use only consuming a small fraction of its energy. Even a full-force attack from a regular forest goblin used only 1%, proving the defense was more than sufficient. Confident, Lin moved on to test his attack power. Chirp watched tensely as he shouted, charging in with a level 1 full-force serious punch, his strongest strike. The goblin seemed unaffected, even confused, and raised its hammer again, but before it could strike, Chirp intercepted, cutting it down with a single blow. Lin reflected that although he still felt like a weak mascot, his capped man skill was now fully effective. Chirp came over and hugged him, but he reminded himself not to be fooled by appearances. The matriarch enhancement had only granted her 1 point in strength and agility, yet the effect was significant. A frontal attack that once might have resulted in a stalemate could now initiate a massacre, confirming that focusing on mentality was his best route to becoming strongest, especially since it cost the fewest points and could be enhanced with blue excellent quality training. Random gear from treasure chests might help, but such opportunities were rare, so triggering as many quests as possible was crucial. Even though Little Chirp still struggled against groups of forest goblins and sometimes suffered losses, giving her a morale boost at the right moment could turn the tide, and she vowed not to be underestimated despite her apparent weakness. A huge goblin was smashing a human while 2 girls cried out, begging their mom to let them go, saying they couldn't go on. Their mother refused, insisting they would face death together. The goblin raised its hammer, but just then, Chirp appeared and sliced it in half. The mom stared in disbelief, wondering if this was the same spider monster from before and why it would intervene. Meanwhile, Captain Lu spotted the stronghold ahead, noting that after days of preparation, now was the perfect time to strike, and he ordered everyone to get ready. From a distance, groans and cries of the goblins in pain reached them, and Captain Lu froze, realizing a battle was already raging at the stronghold. The entire goblin troop was being burned, and in the center, Chirp moved with lethal efficiency. Clenching his teeth, Captain Lu recognized the monster that had killed Wei and warned his team to stay cautious, knowing it seemed even stronger than before. He acknowledged that despite his team's growth, they might still struggle, and although the monster was only attacking forest goblins now, they had to avoid being discovered. After finishing, Chirp vanished from the battlefield, leaving Captain Lu and his team taking a deep breath as they asked what kind of origin this monster could have to so ruthlessly massacre the forest goblins. Captain Lu said if he wasn't mistaken, this was likely a special elite monster sent by the ancient god. They were no match for it now, so any plan to enhance themselves had to avoid its attention at all costs. Though it seemed like retreat, he tried to reassure everyone, saying not to be discouraged. Once they grew strong enough, challenging it would be possible. Elite monsters were extremely difficult, but the reward would be huge, and the crowd buzzed with excitement, praising him for always thinking ahead. Recently, many ancient god warriors had witnessed a purple figure wielding a massive scythe, saving some from countless forest goblins, leading them to believe the spider girl was reinforcement from the ancient god. Others were frustrated, as the spider monster had killed forest goblin escorts, causing their exploration missions to fail. The situation once dominated by goblins had shifted, and the ancient god warriors were slowly gaining ground, with the current goblin stronghold unable to advance further. After half a month of exploration, parts of the forest were cleared, though much remained cloaked in darkness. According to the vice among the ancient god warriors, they needed to find and eliminate the source of the forest goblins to fully secure the region, while rumors about the spider monster continued to grow. All of this seemed distant to Lin, a weak, pitiful boy, feeling helpless, thinking that it was all orchestrated by the ancient god. Sitting down, Lin reflected on the recent battles, noting that despite being outnumbered by forest goblins and sustaining inevitable injuries, the spider merchant had substantial rewards to earn and could use points for healing gear. He had saved up another 60 points and realized that after leveling up, the spider merchant could now operate within a maximum range of 500 meters, though boost morale had a shorter limit, so he planned to stay close behind her to be ready to strengthen her at any moment. Just then, a screen notification appeared, stating that killing 10 regular Forest Goblin soldiers within 1 minute would grant the Forest Goblin Nemesis Junior achievement and a purple rail quality chest. Lin was surprised that simply defeating monsters could trigger an achievement reward and eagerly moved toward the chest, which hovered in the sky, only to be stopped by another notification saying Agatha's achievement chest could not be opened in the area and he needed to return to the base. Confused about location restrictions, he realized the Forest Goblins now knew of his infamous reputation due to the achievement, and a united army of roughly 10 goblins, summoned by their shaman, was forming to hunt him down. On Exploration Day 18, atop a ruined stone building, a masked monster with a red mask, seemingly controlling all the goblins, raised both hands as another goblin knelt before him in apparent worship, signaling that something significant was about to unfold. The goblin boss raised stealth, and a faint, spell-like aura swirled in front of the ruined castle, while all the goblin troops assembled, swords drawn, ready to charge. On day 23 of exploration, Lin nibbled on grass, thinking that although the big one was approaching, he should lay low for now. Little Chirp's sister's strength had improved tremendously, and with some useful gear exchanged, he still felt frustrated keeping his talents hidden. Strategically, they could underestimate the enemy, but tactically, they had to respect their strength, so instead of exploring the past 2 days, he scouted suitable ambush points and scrounged for food. In front of him stood a ruined building with broken pillars and crumbling stone walls, looking like a recently abandoned tribe, perfect for traps. After setting up, he intentionally let some forest goblins escape, ensuring the incoming army would follow this path. Using her upgraded spider skills, Chirp could sense any intruders within a 300-meter radius, giving immediate warning of the approaching army and avoiding ambushes. Lin also prepared a teleport scroll worth 5 points, capable of returning him to base in 5 seconds, far more effective than previous versions for a quick escape if the enemy proved too strong. Holding the scroll, he sensed Chirp trying to communicate, and he said, "The army is coming." He wanted to gauge just how powerful the joint force specifically targeting him truly was. The full force of goblins charged forward, including a centaur-like creature, half goblin, half horse, and several elite goblins. The screen flashed a notification, all-out attack by the joint punitive force of forest goblins completed, reward, 20 points. Lin noted the arriving goblins were mostly level 1 cavalry with impressive mounts, and knew he couldn't hesitate. Timing it perfectly, he boosted morale from above the pillar, sending Chirp to strike. The enemy panicked, shouting as Chirp's enhanced spider matriarch skills gave her control over the battlefield. The ruined building trap Lin had prepared activated, stones elevated and crashed down, crushing the goblins caught in it. Chirp finished off the remainder with precise slashes. Lin breathed, "It's done," but something felt off. The task wasn't marked complete. He spotted an invisible goblin lurking behind Chirp. He shouted for her to stay safe just as the goblin leapt with a devastating strike. Chirp vanished and reappeared safely beside Lin, narrowly avoiding the blow, but her position was revealed. The goblin, an ordinary male adult skilled in magic, hovered and turned invisible, sending out incomprehensible, likely taunting, words. Lin, still unsure how to counter him, activated a teleportation scroll, and just before the goblin could strike, he and Chirp vanished, leaving the goblin furious and shouting in anger. Both of them were teleported to a quiet spot, and Lin remarked that you get what you pay for with a teleportation scroll, noting he had set it to a place where no one else would be and hadn't expected to end up here. He turned to Chirp, warning her to hide as someone was coming, and she quickly slipped into his shadow. He explained that this was a player base, and her high-profile monster kills had drawn attention, which could cause trouble if other players noticed. As he watched people passing by, He reflected that the first goblin shaman they had encountered was far too strong for them right now, and they needed to grow stronger before challenging it, so first they needed a safe spot to open the chest. Returning explorers came through, many damaged or wounded, yet excited, saying they had completed their missions and earned impressive rewards. Walking past them, Lin noticed some were missing hands or legs and were pleading for help, yet their brilliance had decayed. A man shouted, offering money, property, and even 400 boxes of cash, promising a high-ranked position if given some points. Lin thought about how the desire for wealth and power often led to ruin, realizing it was no wonder so many ended up like this. As Lin walked into a quiet corner of the alleyway, he glanced back, satisfied that no one was following. Since Wei had gone to hell, no one cared about someone as insignificant as him. He focused on opening the chest, hoping for something to boost his combat power or enhance mental attributes, thinking that reaching level 2 might let him take down the shaman with the spider matriarch. Commanding the chest to open, he noted that ancient god tier gear ranged in rarity from white, blue, purple, gold, to red, and while the store sold only up to excellent blue gear, the chest revealed a rare purple item, a pill that allowed the user to assume another existence. Although it carried no chance of altering oneself, it projected an image and identity others would perceive, functioning as a level 5 illusion controllable by a prophetic ability of level 5 or higher. Lin realized that even the level 1 forest goblin shaman he had faced could be fooled by this pill, and an idea formed. He could turn into a forest goblin to sneak in and strike the shaman, but first the language barrier had to be solved. He asked his shopping assistant for gear to communicate with forest goblins, and the AI instantly recommended a blue, excellent quality forest goblin flavored jelly bean that allowed smooth communication for 24 hours. Lin marveled at the precision and speed of the AI, noting that since they were at the base, he could leverage the assistant's recommendations and head straight to the mall to buy it, selecting yes when prompted. Meanwhile, on day 26 of exploration, the goblin forces had gathered, with the shaman instructing them to deploy, seek out the foe, and signal others with horns upon discovery, killing any humans encountered without wasting time on spoils, their only target being their rascal nemesis. As one goblin advanced deeper into the forest to confront humans, his eyes suddenly widened in shock. Behind the goblin, Chirp dashed forward, cutting off any chance for the goblin to react. Other goblins noticed the commotion and heard the scream. As they rushed forward, they saw their teammate approaching. It was actually Lin, fully disguised as a goblin. One pointed and said it was the scout who had been exploring and seemed to be chased. Two goblins grabbed Lin in his disguise, demanding to know what was happening. He calmly replied that he had spotted the forest goblin nemesis and called for backup. The screen displayed his disguise effect, substitute pill transforming him into a forest goblin scout, duration 23 hours, and the translation jelly bean, also 23 hours. One goblin quickly blew the horn, alerting the shaman, who soon stood before them, demanding to know the location of their nemesis, the detestable spider and its master. Lin pointed back, noting to himself that the forest goblins could not suspect his identity at all. The substitute pill worked perfectly, blending him in like water in the sea. The shaman, realizing there was no trap ahead, pressed them to continue the hunt, unaware Lin had no enhancement buffs and was completely unguarded against him. Lin called out, claiming he had an important report about humans, which confused the shaman further. Behind the shaman, the spider leaped and struck, killing him instantly. A goblin cried out for revenge, and Lin, thinking strategically, used his boost morale skill, causing Chirp to cut down the remaining goblins one by one without pause. After clearing them, Lin appreciated how handy the morale boost skill was and anticipated the next one at level 5. The remaining goblins protested, claiming the great shaman's blessing would curse him if he killed them. Lin scoffed, dismissing the idea, and the screen confirmed his victory. He had defeated the leader of this forest goblin force, thwarted their encirclement, earned a purple rare reward, and become the public enemy of all forest goblins, from children to adults. Lin thought the increased hatred might be considered a curse and recognized the shaman as formidable, likely level 2 or higher, deciding he needed to eradicate these goblins completely. From behind, the remaining goblins whispered in fear, and Lin turned, threatening to interrogate them individually for any inconsistencies. He asked about their home, the great shaman's location and strength, and more. One goblin muttered that Lin still intended to kill them, acknowledging him as the enemy of all forest goblins. Lin reassured them that if they answered honestly, he would be quick and that they had nothing to fear, reminding them he was not a demon. At the Asian god stronghold, Captain Lu sat at the table surrounded by other members and remarked that everyone had probably noticed how much stronger the forest goblins had become recently. One member shrugged, saying as the monsters grow stronger, so do they, and his only worry was that weaker monsters would be too easy once he leveled up. Another agreed, noting that unlike weaker players who failed to learn, they had an edge. Lu countered that it wasn't that simple. His team had explored deep territory and triggered a mainline hunting mission, which could be shared so others could join. He warned that when the time came, none of them would be safe, and survival would require uniting and competing. A screen flashed in front of them, displaying the Goblin Cleanup mainline mission, explaining that goblins originally did not exist and that the forest altar was key to their emergence. Eradicating it was necessary to prevent future trouble. The mission objectives were to destroy the Goblin Hunter tribe and the Forest Goblin Altar. One member suggested they needed a leader, and since Lu had leadership experience, he should take priority. Lu admitted he had anticipated this and proposed forming a council where all strong members could discuss and vote on strategies before acting. Everyone agreed, though a girl clarified that if the council ever went against her beliefs, she would leave. Lu assured them that joining or leaving the council would remain free and without pressure. With that settled, they turned to discussing how to tackle the main mission effectively. Meanwhile, Lin and Chirp moved through the forest, cutting down goblins along the way. Lin noted that thanks to the Spider Matriarch's enhancement strength, they had successfully annihilated the elite forest goblin troop led by the shaman, and reminded himself to keep his ability to transform into a forest goblin a secret. After interrogating over a dozen goblins, he concluded that the information was reliable. The forest goblins were organized, but their key stronghold lay deep in the forest at the Thunder Tribe, guarded by the Great Shaman and the forest altar. As long as the altar remained, goblins would continue to spawn endlessly. Glancing at his mission notification to destroy the Goblin Thunder Tribe and the Forest Goblin Altar, Lin realized this was what the ancient god called a main mission, far beyond a simple hunting task. On Exploration Day 33, a man asked where they were heading, and the girl explained that forest goblins were numerous and highly skilled, and without systematic training, group combat would be difficult. She mentioned encountering forest goblin cavalry, centaur-like beings enslaved and tormented, suggesting that besides the forest goblins there was another tribe that might oppose them. Captain Lu and others were gathering more recruits and training them to boost combat strength, aiming to find an ally with the centaur tribe against the forest goblins. Lin realized the mission's urgency. The Thunder Tribe had summoned representatives from other tribes, creating a rare gathering. Disguised, Lin claimed to be a hunter from the Raptor Tribe, hoping to witness the Great Shaman and infiltrate the Thunder Tribe, recognizing that blending into this group made infiltration far easier. The goblin muttered that he was tied to the Great Shaman and warned Lin that once they reached the Thunder Tribe, he couldn't let him meet the shaman. Reading the goblin's prompt, Lin realized the creature was a lustful forest goblin, lower in rank but with higher total attributes, and its skill set made the situation even more dangerous. Lin muttered to himself about the bizarre predicament he was in. Later, as all the goblins slept, the creepy one approached him, calling him little brother. Lin grimaced, thinking he could barely tolerate the goblin's gaze, and signaled Chirp to prepare, planning a clean strike from the right angle. Just as Chirp appeared behind the goblin, ready to strike, an arrow suddenly pierced the target from the other side, killing it instantly. Lin froze, realizing an expert archer, possibly an ancient god warrior, was sniping from afar. His substitute pill hadn't expired yet, so even if he revealed himself as human, he wouldn't be trusted, and anyone linking him to the spider merchant wouldn't suspect he was her master. Arrows rained from above, striking sleeping goblins, but Lin's barrier kept him safe. He shouted to Chirp that the enemy was a sniper hiding in the shadows, urging a quick withdrawal. As arrows flew toward Chirp and she caught one and flung it aside, Lin watching them slam into his barrier. He marveled that arrows could even turn corners now, noting each strike drained 2% of his shield energy, an astonishingly powerful skill. The sniper had him locked on, and without something like spiritual teleportation, there was no shaking the attacker. Using the town return scroll he had prepared would guarantee escape, but felt like a waste this early. Outside, Chirp dodged relentlessly, arrows raining in unceasingly. Determined not to give up, Lin signaled, telling Chirp to prepare to boost morale. Suddenly, the arrows stopped midair, and Lin's eyes moved upward to a cliff where a centaur woman stood, her horse legs planted firmly. Realization struck him. The attacker was a centaur, not a goblin. She muttered in her language about the forest goblins being enemies, loosing arrows at them, but froze when she saw Lin, mistaking him for a child goblin. Reading her status window, Lin saw she clearly despised forest goblins, though an aura of love and her skills counterbalanced her hatred, leaving her hesitating, caught between action and restraint. Lin thought, although this centaur's figure seemed slight, her agility surpassed even the spider matriarch, reaching the peak for a level 1. Her fluctuating attitude was worrisome. Who knew what deep grudge she held against the forest goblins? If he died because of her misplaced anger, it would be unjust. Reaching for safety, he used a remote shopping chance to eat 10 translation jelly beans at once, relieve their effects stacked instead of overlapping. He spoke quickly, pleading with her to listen. She asked if he was one of them, and Lin explained he was also a centaur, transformed by a forest goblin's curse. She hesitated, then her prompt confirmed she believed him as one of her kind, though cautiously. Lin spun a full story, recounting how the evil female forest goblin shaman killed his family, cursed him, and abandoned him in the wilderness, forcing him to endure hardship to seek revenge. The centaur girl listened, telling him this was the time to be strong. Lin noted her speech was fragmented, making communication tricky, but he adapted. Chirp watched, visibly annoyed at the slow process. Lin explained that the centaur had formed a contract to protect him and help with his revenge plan. The centaur took Chirp's hand, thanking her for her kindness. Lin compared her to the spider matriarch. While the matriarch loved him deeply, the centaur merely sympathized with his plight. He reasoned her grudge against the forest goblins could be leveraged. Speaking aloud, he proposed that they join forces, urging her to gather her tribe too, emphasizing that strength lay in unity. Her expression remained completely blank, and Lin realized this would be tougher than he expected. Could it be that her people had all fallen to the forest goblins? She finally said, "Gone, family, friends all gone." Lin thought, damn, I had suspected a war between our races when I saw the forest goblins riding the centaur mounts. But now it was clear the centaur had been nearly wiped out while the goblins held the upper hand. Lin placed his hand gently on her shoulder and said, "Sister, didn't you once say that each tragedy makes the survivors stronger? We must avenge those lost. Even though I've been cursed into this form everyone despises, it lets me blend into the forest goblin tribe. If we strike from within, we can accomplish something big. Don't you agree?" She whispered, inside, vulnerability. Then he turned to Chirp, saying, "Little Chirp's sister, you can hide in my shadow and follow me into the tribe safely." With that, Chirp vanished. The girl crouched, asking where the entrance was. He explained, "Chirp can follow because she's contracted with me. If you want to sneak in too, we'll need another method, one that might be uncomfortable." She nodded firmly. "For revenge, I'll endure it." He handed her a collar, saying, "Wear this and pretend to be a slave." She snapped back, "This is a mind control curse." He smiled, "Don't worry, the evil gear curse is gone. It's just a plain collar. Now wear it, and we can infiltrate the forest goblin tribe together." She hesitated, "Really? But I can't breathe in it." Lin recalled his earlier attack on the forest goblin cavalry. He had tried to unlock a slave collar to gain allies, but when the collar was destroyed, darkness seeped into the wearer's mind, driving him mad. Only through the attribute panel did he learn that destroying a slave collar automatically triggered a madness curse with no cure. He had no choice but to have the spider matriarch execute him. From then on, he concluded there was no point in saving centaurs who became slaves. It was safer to eliminate them. Once the madness curse triggers, the collar loses all power and becomes just an ordinary one. Lin recovered these collars from the dead centaur, and thought that if they could find her tribe, they might negotiate to sneak a team of fake slaves into the forest goblin tribe to stir trouble. He didn't expect that ultimately only one collar would prove useful, and there was still much to plan before officially infiltrating. First, they needed to confirm the centaur's name. As she tried to fit the collar over her head, he asked her name, and she replied, "Mia." He noted that the naming convention of her race leaned toward a Western style, and now that he was pretending to be one of them, the name had to match. Next, they would sneak into the forest goblin tribe together, with her playing the part of a mind-wiped, dazed slave. She stood upright with a dizzy expression and promised to act convincingly for revenge. Chirp smiled, noting that some training might be needed, and hoped her stock of substitute pills would last. On exploration day 37, the goblins guarding the entrance barked orders, demanding respect for the greatest shaman. One goblin presented a bone as a gesture of respect, and the guard accepted, remarking it was useful. Another family offered their meager potatoes, which the guard angrily dismissed, declaring the act disrespectful, and proceeded to attack them. As the chaos unfolded, the guard laughed and claimed he needed 2 female slaves from the family. Soon, more refugees arrived, including a centaur slave of wealthy appearance, a potential money-making opportunity for the tribe. Lin observed, noting that after just 1 day of training, Mia could act convincingly. After traveling another day to reach the tribe, he had 6 substitute pills left. One goblin stopped Lin and Mia for a routine check, and he read its prompt, noting that even first-time visitors would face hostility. The guard of the Thunder tribe assumed superiority, viewing newcomers as inexperienced bumpkins ready to be exploited. As Lin entered, he saw so many goblins guarding the area that even their own kind were being forced into slavery. He wondered if these goblins were equally ruthless in exploiting others. Despite the small scale of the forest goblins, they still managed such feats. But thankfully he had prepared, taking a substitute pill to spare the forest goblin from misery. A guard then shouted that the great shaman demanded a thorough check due to the arrival of racial enemies, forbidding lowly civilians from stepping onto the noble land of the Thunder tribe. Lin thought that any intelligent race seems bound to develop social inequality. His screen alerted him that even the lowly harbor rage, and if a guard dared to call him lowly, it was intolerable. A face-slapping reward system appeared, granting points from 20 to 30 depending on intensity. Lin shook his head, marveling that such a quest existed and wondering if the mission description only grew stranger the deeper he entered the forest goblin territory. The goblin looked at Mia and said she couldn't just walk in, she had to pay a tax. Mia thought, as a slave, I just need to space out. The goblin added that her slave appearance marked her for pleasure, not battle, so a tax of 100 bones seemed fair. Lin noted the goblin's greed, selfishness, and arrogance but had long been prepared, triggering the face-slapping quest to handle 2 issues at once. He declared he was an emissary of the Leon tribe and a close ally of the great shaman of the Thunder tribe, holding a half-skull taken from a lustful forest goblin emissary. The goblin considered that noble emissaries represented their tribe and naturally commanded respect, while another goblin complained about the emissary's status, only to be kicked and told to shut up, acknowledging the grand emissary. The prompt confirmed the goblin truly believed him, noting his brain was half greed and half shamelessness. Lin then ordered that a small goblin girl and a goblin woman from his tribe be allowed in, and the goblins knelt, praising him. Lin reflected that revealing his emissary status had averted a crisis, though he wondered why no task completion prompt appeared, realizing that physically slapping someone as a common emissary would have been a diplomatic disaster. He then told the goblins not to report his visit to the great shaman, saying he would see him personally, and the goblins reluctantly agreed, leaving the minor task with only a small reward. The Thunder tribe is the largest forest goblin tribe, divided into 3 levels based on terrain. The lowest level houses mostly non-combatant civilians who toil from dawn to dusk, dedicating themselves to the tribe. The second level is for combat-ready soldiers, while the highest level holds the nobility, enjoying privileges without labor. Legends say noble forest goblins carry ancestral blood, granting superior mental powers and the ability to wield unique spells. Strength brings power, and the tribe is ruled by noble shamans who have mastered sorcery. The central temple in the noble district is the origin of the world forest goblin and home to the most revered great shaman. At the castle, Stabalin and Mia are told the sacred temple grounds are off-limits to outsiders. Even a grand emissary cannot just enter, as the great shaman will summon all tribal emissaries to discuss racial enemies. Lin reflects that despite revealing his identity, the previous emissaries' boasts about ties to the great shaman were likely exaggerated, and he's relieved he didn't act arrogantly, successfully infiltrating the tribe. He considers how to get closer to the great shaman within the noble district and realizes, luckily, the previous forest goblin emissary had invited him to his large villa, giving them a place to stay. Lin tells Mia this will be their residence, thanking her for playing the slave. She insists she is not tired and notes that the lower-tier forest goblins are poor, prompting Lin to be kind to them, though he reminds himself their main target is the great shaman. He notes Mia's naivety in sympathizing with her enemy race but keeps his plans to help a goblin family secret, then turns to Chirk, saying not to rush into setting a trap because he has a new idea. Lin sits on the sofa, explaining that his original plan was to pose as an emissary, invite the great shaman as a guest, and stab him in the kidney to leave the tribe in chaos. Mia immediately reacts, suggesting they go for it, but Lin shakes his head, saying that after observing the tribe, he realizes that an emissary's status, while high, is still far below the great shaman's. Even if he sent an invitation, the shaman would not come, and any meeting would be heavily guarded, making an assassination impossible. Mia is shocked, and Chirp exhales deeply as Lin continues, outlining his new plan: first create chaos within the tribe, then exploit the turmoil to strike the shaman. Later, Lin and Mia approach the huge ancestral drum in the assembly square, knowing that striking it summons the entire tribe in emergencies or by the shaman's order. Mia swings a massive bone to beat the drum, and goblins shout in outrage, demanding the capturer be seized, but one reminds them that this is an emissary from the esteemed Leon tribe, causing the crowd to pause and gather cautiously. Lin reflects that his emissary status gives him some leeway and notes the unusual use of honorifics in their language. With the majority of the tribe assembled, he raises both hands and addresses them, claiming a revelation from the ancestors to guide them against racial enemies and ensure happiness for every forest goblin. The goblins murmur in disbelief, questioning if it is true, while Lin points out their hardships: less food, more labor, and unrewarded valor. A goblin shouts in agreement, demanding to know the reason, and Lin declares it is all because of their enemies. Lin says they are completely wrong, and the goblins exchange confused glances. He points at them, insisting that the cause is not the enemy of their race but the injustice within their own tribe. One goblin hesitates, asking if the great shaman didn't claim the enemy is responsible, admitting they don't quite understand what injustice means and jokingly asking if it's edible, while another wonders what's for dinner. Lin internally groans, realizing his speech might be going over their heads, and notices some aren't paying attention at all. Fortunately, the assistant's prompt screens remain hidden, so he can access his items unnoticed. He asks for gear to enhance persuasiveness under 50 points, but none exist, so he removes the price limit, choosing the cheapest available, which is a simple megaphone worth 70 points. The megaphone increases negotiation rank by 1 level during speeches, capping at level 5, and allows words to more easily stir emotions when the mental gap between speaker and listener is large. Lin thinks it's almost useless outside this situation, especially compared to rare purple gear, and wonders how he'll make up the extra points. Just then, a goblin guard yells at him for causing trouble, reminding him that the great shaman doesn't even recognize emissaries from the Leon tribe. Lin seizes the perfect timing, raises his fist, and swings, shouting "Take this face," a slap punch, aiming directly at the goblin. The screen popped up showing face slapping task completed with a reward of 20 points as Lin slapped the goblin, finally earning the minimum points. True to form, the punch caused no real harm, but the task was marked complete. The guard shouted, furious, accusing Lin of starting a fight in the ancient square and threatening to kill him, claiming he only wanted some money as a mercenary. Lin fired back, calling him a shameless old thief, leaving the goblin frozen, unable to act. With the megaphone in hand, Lin's voice carried over the crowd, condemning the guard for being greedy instead of protecting the tribe, forcing every tribesman to pay under his selfishness, labeling his actions despicable and shameless, saying the tribesman would rather eat his flesh and drink his blood. Lin thought the megaphone-enhanced incitement skill was immensely effective, making the effort almost effortless. The goblins murmured in agreement, acknowledging the guard's wrongdoing, debating whether he deserved punishment or dismissal. One suggested firing him and appointing a new captain, which would allow the commoners rightful authority, and even net them another female forest goblin slave, an outcome they considered even better. Chaos erupted across the goblins as they turned to one another, shouting accusations and threats, some claiming they would kill him, others insisting they were too many to fear. Civilians pressed around the guards, making way as word spread that Giant Fang, the most outstanding young forest goblin, had arrived. From the front, the great shaman appeared, his stats displayed, but a prompt noted that his indulgent lifestyle had drained his strength, making him weak. Lin thought no need to analyze how to kill him, realizing the great shaman would not be lured out so easily. The guard bowed, reporting the troublemaker, while another demanded which tribe Lin was from, offended that anyone dared stir unrest in the ancestral square blessed by the great ancestor. Through the megaphone, Lin proclaimed he was from the Neon tribe, a saint listening to the divine circle of the ancestors, a guide destined to lead the forest toward greatness, saying that success need not bear his name but would count him among its unseen contributors. Lin noted the shaman seemed high-ranking but manageable, a luck not too bad. The goblins murmured among themselves, some unsure what he meant, others understanding and impressed by his presence. One goblin woman declared him the coolest forest goblin ever, while another teased her, saying she had claimed her husband was the most majestic and handsome. Lin continued, announcing that the great ancestor had revealed that all forest goblins were his descendants and loved individually, declaring that every forest goblin had the right to live freely and happily, leaving everyone wide-eyed in astonishment. The goblin's eyes widened as Lin continued, saying the great ancestor and sister wanted every forest goblin to be equal, with the right to live freely and happily. Murmurs rose. Could it really be true that the ancestor and sister cared for them? The shaman roared, accusing Lin of lying and claiming to hear the divine oracle. Guards advanced, but just in time, Mia let an arrow fly. Lin pressed on, pointing out that some goblins had twisted the oracle to create inequality, forcing a false nobility on the tribe. He condemned the injustice that kept laborers in misery, enslaved and beaten for the amusement of nobles, and the shamans who exploited the ancestors' will. From behind, a forest goblin kicked another aside in anger as Lin declared that a true, fair, selfless goblin should lead as shaman. Suddenly a voice boomed, demanding him to shut up, the entire team arriving, the head scolding him for striking the ancestral drum and offending the ancestors. Guards tried to advance, but other goblins blocked them, insisting the Nameless One spoke for the tribe and must be protected. The shaman screamed in outrage at the commoner's defiance, threatening extermination, while some goblin women voiced support, declaring the Nameless One was right. Lin noted that class conflict among greedy, cruel high-ranking goblins had already primed the lower classes for rebellion, though the main fighting force still held back. Realizing more was needed to ignite true anger, he called out to the tribesmen to hear him, offering surrender and asking for Giant Fawn to lock him up, baiting the next spark of revolt. The goblin girls grew visibly sad, asking why the Nameless One was surrendering. Lin explained that he came to bring fairness and a better life to their kind, but if everyone had to fight and suffer just to protect him, it would go against that purpose. Raising both hands wide, he declared he was willing to be bound voluntarily, ready to bear the sin of their race so that his kind could be redeemed, and as long as everyone remembered this day and worked to eliminate injustice, his sacrifice would not be in vain. He smiled, and the goblins cried, shouting that he was truly acting for their sake. As he began walking toward the shaman, the goblin girls wept and called out warnings to Giant Fiend, threatening retaliation if harm came to him. The shaman cursed, ready to strike, but a guard stopped him, warning that outright killing would provoke public outrage. The shaman ordered Lin locked in the rotting dungeon, promising a fair trial once their racial enemies were dealt with, and advised all to stay in line lest even knobs shall be punished. Lin thought everything was under control. Elsewhere, countless goblins lay defeated amid widespread fires, and on the largest stone, Captain Lu spread out a map, declaring that by taking down the forest goblin stronghold, they could establish a base to gather strength and prepare for an attack on the forest goblin headquarters. A soldier reported Captain Yu's return, and Lu asked if reinforcements had arrived. The soldier lamented that if any message had reached them sooner, they might have already taken down the forest goblin tribe on their own. Captain Lu pointed out remnants of the centaur tribe, realizing they had been wiped out by the forest goblins long ago. She acknowledged their formidable power, noting that the forest goblins had defeated her race before their arrival. Another soldier accepted the lack of reinforcements, affirming that as warriors enhanced by the ancient god, they were not afraid of mere forest goblins. Captain Lu thought that while elites could handle regular forest goblins one-on-one, there were too few of them, and facing the full forest goblin army would be dangerous due to sheer numbers. Attribute improvement relied on cumulative training, and gear upgrades were rank limited, so even with many points, a quick boost was impossible. Speaking aloud, he said they'd need a new strategy without reinforcements, calling on everyone to pool points to strengthen all ancient god warriors, setting an example as a leader and hoping the reward would justify his sacrifice. On day 36, the shaman entered the filthy underground prison and told the guard to watch the door, ignore any screams, and keep the prisoners contained. Inside, Lin's hands were pinned to the wall, and even Mia had her hands restrained while seated. Lin greeted the shaman, teasing about the delay, and the shaman warned that the great shaman had ordered a public execution after defeating their enemies, adding he could still torment Lin for now and asked if he looked forward to it. Lin replied he did, appreciating the shaman's unintentional cooperation. Furious, the shaman raised a whip, threatening to make Lin scream, but just as he struck, Lin's commander chirped, prompting the attack, and behind the shaman, Chirp slashed at his head with her weapon. The shaman was thrown to the ground, barely able to speak, panicking and begging, promising shells and young slaves, pleading not to be killed and asking the guards to be alerted. Chirp quickly silenced him with a silk spiderweb over his mouth, explaining he would not be killed because he would serve as a substitute, reminding him that admitting guilt by escaping would be foolish. Lin then instructed Chirp to hang him where Lin had been restrained, and turned to Mia, asking her to retrieve the bow and other items the guards had taken. Mia agreed, leaving the shaman fuming at the clever little Chirp, noting that even imprisoned, the guards would recognize him immediately. As Mia left, Lin told the shaman that all forest goblins looked the same to him, so he might as well beat him until even his mother wouldn't recognize him, and with that, Chirp cracked her knuckles and started savagely hitting the shaman. Outside, the guards overheard and laughed, commenting on the giant fanged shaman's torment at the hands of the Nameless One, lamenting they could not see how he suffered. The shaman had been beaten so brutally that Lin read his prompt, noting the forest goblin seemed like it had heat stroke, untreatable, and its equipment might as well be recycled. Lin decided it was safest to strip him completely. Soon, every piece of clothing and gear was removed. Lin praised Chirp, saying her work was excellent. Now the shaman's limbs were broken, his mouth gagged, and all belongings gone, ensuring no forest goblin could recognize him as a substitute. The shaman still clung to hope, thinking other goblins would soon realize he was gone. Lin turned and said he was kind-hearted and couldn't bear seeing the shaman cling to hope only to have it crushed, so he would deliver despair in advance. Holding a peach-colored pill, the substitute pill, Lin revealed it to the shaman, who panicked, unsure what it was for. As Lin chewed the pill, his disguise wavered, showing that beneath he was human, not goblin. The shaman's heart sank as Lin transformed to look exactly like him. He could hardly believe it. The enemy of their kind could assume his form at will. It felt impossible, a nightmare he could not escape. Lin, observing the collapse of the shaman's mental state, noted that with his psyche broken, there was no risk the goblin could use curses to alert the guards or clarify his identity. Lin holds the pendant taken from the shaman, noting from the attribute panel that the forest goblin's agility had been enhanced by equipment. After a moment, he realizes the only item resembling spiritual equipment on the goblin is this pendant. Since it was worn, it could be cursed, but he decides to try it. As he wears it, the status window opens. Agility remains unchanged, but his mentality attribute rises significantly, exchanging the blue from excellent quality training technique. He's close to leveling up when Chirp leans in to look closely at the pendant. Hesitating, he thinks it might be inappropriate, but seeing her interest, he takes it off and says it's her gift. He places the pendant around her neck, thinking it's useless to him and might as well boost her attributes. As Chirp wore the pendant, a faint glow circled her body. Lin stared, reading the prompt. Magical creatures rely on magic gear for enhancement, just as clothes shape men, and this accessory slot item was exclusive to them. Lin realized that's why it didn't work on him. The pendant could boost the spider matriarch's agility by 1 point, worth at least 100 points as an ancient god item, but he shook his head, thinking only ancient god warriors can use such items, and none enhance mentality. Boosting the spider matriarch's physical attribute was far more profitable. Having experimented before, he knew she could carry gear in and out of his shadow, not just what fits in one hand, and now she could also wear special equipment. If they had a dimensional pocket, she could serve as portable storage. Chirp waved her web faster, enjoying the speed increase. Lin instructed her to keep the substitute pill safe, and she slipped back into the shadows. He thought about the pill's effectiveness against low-level monsters, though it only replaced what he had encountered before. Otherwise, summoning the great ancestor of the forest goblins would make the task easy. Mia appeared, saying she found it, but seeing Lin's shaman appearance, she asked who he was. He thanked her and explained his curse had changed his form again. Mia, intimidated by the curse, glanced at him angrily. Lin thought the oppressive air made it urgent to leave, so he and Mia exited. At the door, he told the guards the interrogation was done, and the Nameless One had confessed. They were to ignore any noises and prevent other forest goblins from visiting. The guard assured him that the criminal would properly suffer, as any noble's obsession deserved punishment. The guards noticed Mia and asked what was happening. Lin replied after some friendly exchange that the man had voluntarily offered this slave to please him. The guards confirmed there was no problem, praising Giant Fang for making the prisoner obedient. Lin waved and said he had urgent matters, then started walking, thinking that now, with the shaman's identity, he could attempt something big even though there was no immediate opportunity to get close to the great shaman. From the huge building, the great shaman sat, his stat window revealing another level of power. The prompt noted the chief shaman remained incredibly stable, and a sneak attack would be unwise. Lin considered that the great shaman's agility was also enhanced by equipment, perhaps a pendant increasing it by 2 points. After reporting his work, he planned to leave the temple and continue with the destruction plan Giant Fang had outlined. Meanwhile, 2 men were tied to a pillar. One complained about being forced so deep, lamenting he had never been in a relationship. The other cursed him, blaming him for breaking their formation and preventing them from holding out until reinforcements arrived. A goblin approached to cut one of the men, but another stopped him, recognizing Giant Fang and questioning his presence. Lin stepped forward, thinking he had come to initiate the forest goblin warriors but found human captives instead. Knowing Mia's kindness, he felt compelled to intervene. He asked what had happened, and the goblins explained their squad had encountered people near the tribe, fought a bloody battle, and captured 2 lives to sacrifice to the great ancestor Lin, noting another ancient god warrior had already scouted near the Thunder tribe. One captive pleaded to be spared, offering to serve as a slave and guide them to the ancient god warrior camp, while the other shouted accusations of betrayal against the ancient god warrior alliance. Lin thought Captain Lu had actually formed an alliance and was even giving points to strengthen weaker members, which surprised them since it wasn't like him at all. One man shouted, calling the other an idiot and asking if he wasn't afraid joining the forest goblins would make him fail the main quest and be wiped out by the ancient gods. The other man replied defiantly that he would take as many down with him as he could. Seeing all this, Lin thought maybe Captain Lu realized that the main mission required dealing with the entire forest goblin tribe, and that a direct attack from outside would only work if most ancient god warriors joined forces, so he had to endure the pain and sacrifice himself. One man pleaded, saying he was useful and begging for his life, while the other shouted that the forest goblins wouldn't understand him. Lin thought that when there were too many people, all sorts would show up. As he approached, the man shouted he would never surrender. Lin considered that the brainless and spineless were trash, but he gave an order to the goblins, saying the great shaman had a divine message. These people were now cursed material. The guard said being used for the great shaman's curse was a blessing and promised proper handling. He commanded, send them to Giant Fang. The goblins detangled the captives, and one thanked Lin, saying it wasn't over yet. Mia thought it was safe and good. Lin then instructed the goblins that the noisy one should be bled first and buried for 7 days, while the other should get extra food and not die. The goblins acknowledged. Lin thought it was time for business and asked about the outsider who had surrendered against the great shaman earlier. The guard said the outsider had insulted the great shaman and must confess before the great ancestors. Lin noted the guard's outward respect hid resentment, as the previous speech had stirred deep emotions against the tribe's unfairness. Later that night, Mia stood outside the tent, keeping watch and thinking to alert Lin if any nobles appeared. Inside, Lin sat with other goblins as one poured a drink. He said they didn't need to be so nervous, explaining he wasn't the kind of forest goblin they imagined, and that he captured the nameless one only because he followed the great shaman's orders, adding that the old fool had lost his mind. A goblin protested, saying the great shaman represented the will of the great ancestor and acted for their own good. Lin thought winning over these warriors wouldn't be easy, but he was prepared. He took out a loudspeaker and spoke about the sacred artifact inherited from the great nameless one, recalling the heroic sacrifices made. He reminded them of the struggles of the lower forest goblins while the nobles indulged in pleasure, prompting widened eyes from all inside the tent. One goblin noted his acting was good, thinking Lin was now an ally. Another sighed, saying that knowing the tribe was sick didn't help since the nameless one was imprisoned and even Lin couldn't defy the great shaman as an ordinary warrior. Another clenched his teeth, lamenting there was no hope, but Lin shouted again that it wasn't hopeless. The goblins asked why, and Lin explained he visited the nameless one in prison, who shared a story with a lesson for them. A huge death-curse magic circle held many of their kind asleep, soon to be drained of life and turned to withered corpses, but under a sleep spell so they wouldn't feel the sorrow. A forest goblin outside the circle could shout to awaken a few and give them a chance to save themselves, though the chance was slim, and failure would make those woken endure the agony of having their life force drained. Lin asked what they would do in such a situation, and the goblins murmured among themselves, debating whether to wake their kin at the risk of causing more suffering or to take the chance, since at least it offered hope. One admitted he could not decide and begged to know what the goblin in the story chose. Lin explained that instead of shouting from outside, the goblin broke into the magic circle, personally waking each of his kind, and through their combined effort they destroyed the death curse. Shocked, a goblin asked if such a thing was possible, and Lin said the Nameless One told him it was based on a true event from a distant land. He said the lesson was simple: if you do not try, it is impossible, but as long as you try, there is hope. He revealed the Nameless One was the goblin who awakened him and vowed by the sacred artifact to carry on that will and awaken others, then asked if they would join him. The goblins agreed to follow, and as Lin held one's hand, he declared that since their aim was to eliminate exploitation and oppression, the title Big One would no longer be used and they would be comrades. Moved to tears, the goblin echoed the word. From then on, the theory of the death curse spread secretly among the lower and middle ranks of the tribe. On exploration day 38, Lin waved farewell, calling them comrades. Thanks to the loudspeaker, in only 2 days most forest goblin warriors and even the civilians had become allies, waiting for the chance to rebel. As he left, a female goblin stopped him, accusing him of making a grave mistake by forbidding them from visiting the Nameless One, calling his crime unforgivable. Lin tried to explain, while thinking the prompt seemed to take pleasure in his misfortune. The prompt declared that the giant Fong role he played had captured their beloved brother, and that they hated him. Another girl intervened, suggesting maybe he was forced by the great shaman, and her prompt showed she still thought well of him despite the situation. Lin mused that it really was him who captured himself, while a third girl's prompt said she saw him as a sinful man. He then told them this was not the place to talk and suggested they move elsewhere, thinking that he had originally planned to start with the female goblins to create an opportunity, and now the time had come. With Lin's heartfelt explanation, the female goblins chose to believe he had no choice, tears streaming as they said he must have suffered greatly. They pitied him, saying he clearly wanted to protect the Nameless One but was forced by the great shaman, calling it tragic. Lin replied that after much thought, he had found only one way to save the Nameless One. Surprised, a girl asked what it was, and he explained that the great shaman had been misled by slander from male goblins spreading rumors. To rescue the Nameless One, they had to make the great shaman realize his mistake. Fired up, one girl shouted that the judgment was wrong, though others hesitated, wondering how they could make him see it. Lin told them they could strike the ancestral war drum and speak before the entire tribe. Worried, one asked what would happen if the male nobles tried to interfere, but Lin raised the mic and swore by the Nameless One's sacred artifact that he would deal with them and vowed to save him. Moved, the girls thanked him, promising to work with him to rescue the Nameless One. After sealing this pact with the females, Lin turned to the male nobles, not to persuade but to inform them. As soon as he spoke, one of them furiously raised his vines, saying those weaklings were plotting to save the Nameless One, who championed commoners and colluded with outsiders to overthrow the great shaman. Lin calmly lifted the mic and swore by the trophy taken from the Nameless One that his words were the truth. The goblin thanked him, saying that thanks to Giant Fong's warning they had prepared and gained the upper hand. On the 39th day of exploration, the girls stood at the drum, striking it as one cried out that the great shaman had been deceived by traitors, declaring the Nameless One innocent and demanding his release for the sake of justice. Watching, a male goblin asked if they too should step forward to support them, but Lin told him their goal was to save lives and end exploitation, not to fight among themselves. If shouting could pressure the exploiters, then it was a good thing, but if they appeared, the nobles might believe they were forcing them through violence, sparking resistance and civil conflict. Hearing this, the goblin nodded, admitting Lin had thought it through carefully. Soon after, the nobles arrived, yelling for silence, accusing the girls of ringing the ancestral war drum without permission, disturbing order, and dishonoring the great shaman. Guards advanced to arrest them as one girl cried out in disbelief, saying Lin promised the nobles would be pursued. The nobles inwardly sneered, thinking that once these troublemakers were subdued, the lower class would fall silent. Another girl shouted that as descendants of the great ancestor, it was their right to strike the drum, but the guards seized them regardless. One turned to Lin, asking how it had come to this, and Lin cursed himself for underestimating the nobles' greed and unwillingness to even hold proper talks for the tribe's future. Just then, Mia stepped forward, yelling for the guards to release the girls, and the other guards followed with a shout of support. One girl brightened, calling out that the giant had come to help. The nobles stiffened, demanding to know why he was here, but Lin raised the mic and thundered for them to shut up, calling them shameless old thieves. He said he had misjudged them, never expecting that they would pretend to agree but instead set a trap to imprison comrades under false charges. The girl beside him cried out, condemning the nobles as cunning scoundrels. The noble tried to speak, begging them to listen to his explanation, but Lin cut him off, shouting for Mia to act. Without hesitation, she raised her bow and fired an arrow toward the noble, throwing everyone into confusion. Lin declared that since they had tried to reason but were only met with tricks, there was no need to reason anymore. He called on his comrades to storm the prison and rescue the Nameless One, and the goblins roared in unison, chanting to storm the prison and set him free. Their cries of release the Nameless One and end exploitation and injustice echoed as they surged forward toward the tall throne building where the great shaman resided, the fire of mutiny fully lit. Just then, an arrow struck the ground in front of them, halting their advance as a goblin stepped out, warning that anyone who moved forward would be killed without mercy. One of the girls gasped, recognizing him as Fang, the tribe's strongest cavalry general, who was supposed to be out searching for their racial enemies. Lin thought that no matter how strong Fang was, forcing the forest goblins to fight among themselves was already worth it, but to hold their ground they needed morale. Raising his loudspeaker, he shouted that even if Fang brought the elite cavalry to block their path, the will to resist awakened by the Nameless One would never break. He declared they would never retreat, and the goblins cried back with force, chanting the same as they pushed forward with renewed determination. Above the towering hall, the great shaman knelt in prayer as the uprising shook the tribe. Giant Fang had led those swayed by the Nameless One to storm the prison, and though Fang's troops tried to suppress them, the sheer number of bewitched followers made it impossible to hold them back. Shock spread among the priests when one whispered that even Giant Fang himself might be bewitched, but another angrily denied it, saying Fang was the great shaman's most trusted ally and could never betray them. A trembling goblin swore it was true, but the great shaman calmly told Great Wood to release him and simply answer. He questioned why peasants, who should have little combat power, could resist so long, and the reply came that Fang was not only leading commoners but also middle-class warriors and even several nobles. Great Wood cursed, furious that so many had believed in outsiders' madness and turned against their noble blood. Another priest warned that while low-class lives could be replaced through the Abyss Gate, the loss of warriors and nobles would weaken the tribe permanently. The great shaman ordered Great Wood to take the ancestral totem and preserve the tribe's strength however he saw fit. Accepting the sacred relic, Great Wood promised to act decisively. As the totem was carried out, the tribe fell into chaos, goblins clashing violently as both sides, those loyal to the shaman and those rebelling, fought with bloodlust. Lin, caught in the turmoil, thought that his plan had only been to exhaust the goblins against each other, yet their combined force was strong enough to gain an edge over even the elite cavalry. Perhaps, he considered, they could push further and topple the great shaman altogether. But before he could act, a cry rose through the battlefield. The ancestral totem had descended. At once, the goblins froze, their weapons still in hand but their bodies unmoving. Lin stared in shock, wondering why the entire tribe had suddenly halted. From the stair, Wood Shaman descended, holding the ancestral totem, declaring it the symbol of the great ancestor, and announcing that the divine oracle would now be proclaimed. Lin glanced at the status window, noting the prompt warning that this identity he was substituting for harbored deep hatred for Giant Fang. His tension spiked, realizing the bloodline he mimicked had attracted immense resentment. The forest goblin shaman's enhanced equipment added another layer of concern. Wood Shaman proclaimed that the great shaman, following the divine oracle, recognized the Nameless One, and the crowd erupted in joy. A girl exclaimed that the great ancestor truly protected the Nameless One, confirming his innocence. Lin's thoughts darkened. This announcement was designed to demoralize their resistance, potentially wasting all his efforts. Wood Shaman continued, chastising the gathered goblins for acting before judgment, yet mercifully forgiving them and urging them to return home. Kneeling, the goblins praised the great shaman's wisdom. Lin noted that their reverence ran deep. Even if aware of wrongdoing, they would only believe the shaman had been deceived. Speaking aloud, Lin urged comrades not to leave, insisting they wait to celebrate the Nameless One's release and volunteered to personally escort him out. A goblin warned him not to push luck, arguing the great shaman had already forgiven everyone, yet Lin retorted that questioning the Nameless One's innocence contradicted the shaman's own declaration. The goblin seethed, but Wood Shaman intervened, agreeing that Lin's request was reasonable. Together, Lin and Wood Shaman approached the prison, and Wood Shaman admitted he had underestimated Lin's ambition and resolve, genuinely impressed by his decisive actions. Lin's brow furrowed, thinking what was this guy suddenly rambling about. Wood Shaman continued, saying he had always seemed like a laid-back loafer, only caring about enjoying the great show, but in reality, he had been ambitious, waiting for the perfect moment. When outsiders, the Nameless One, incited the peasants, Lin had seized the chance to build momentum and nearly overthrow the great shaman to control the tribe. Yet the scheme was easily thwarted, ironically gaining him even more trust. Lin mused, so they think I am plotting a coup, such a narrow view. If they wanted a fight here, alerting the forest goblins outside wouldn't even matter. As they walked inside the prison, Wood Shaman remarked that because of Lin's rebellion, his own status had risen and advised leaving the Thunder Tribe quickly, warning the great shaman would not spare him. Lin smirked, replying he enjoyed giving advice too, and was merely sharing wisdom with others. In that instant, Chirp appeared, slashing at the shaman. Lin's voice rang sharp, saying his wisdom was for the departed and that one should tread carefully on the road to the underworld if they hoped to accompany the great shaman. Chirp moved to seize an artifact from Wood Shaman, preparing to consume it, but Lin stopped her, declaring he had other plans for it. Outside the prison, a crowd had gathered, clamoring to see the Nameless One, impatiently asking why neither Lin nor the Nameless One had appeared. A comrade whispered that Great Wood Shaman had revealed after the Arioti, peasants would yield more food with no hard labor, as their toil supported the upper-class forest goblins. The useless goblins who sided with peasants would be demoted, ensuring even high-ranking noble women would serve obediently. Cheers erupted as someone announced Giant Fang's approach, and others thought to finish celebrating, send peasants home, and settle scores later. But then Lin emerged from the prison carrying a battered, disfigured Giant Fang, the Nameless One, announcing he had died under the shaman's brutal torture, killed by the tribe's injustice. The crowd recoiled in shock. Guards whispered in disbelief, insisting no shaman besides Giant Fang had interrogated the Nameless One, and eyes turned toward the absent Great Wood Shaman. Lin bellowed, declaring that from the start, the great shaman never intended to lift the Nameless One, because the noble system he set up was the tribe's greatest injustice. Lin thought it was frustrating that even now, many could not see such an obvious problem. Pulling out his loudspeaker, he shouted Giant Fang, swore to their great ancestors to avenge the Nameless One, overthrow the great shaman, destroy the nobles, and eliminate injustice. The crowd, enraged by the harsh reality, roared back, demanding justice, shouting to overthrow the great shaman, destroy exploitation, avenge the Nameless One, and honor comrades with the blood of oppressors. With that, they surged toward the guards. Lin smirked, thinking a fallen forest goblin could spark more than a living one. The rebellion's blaze was finally ignited. Though civilian goblins were weak compared to the well-equipped warriors, they pressed on, undeterred, their hearts struck by the Nameless One's words and inspired by the Giant Fang shaman's death magic circle theory. Even in death, their will to resist burned strong. They closed in on the great shaman, but more of his allies blocked their path. Someone shouted from behind that the temple, a sacred resting place beside the great ancestor, must not be breached. Lin called out to his comrades, warning that the temple where the great shaman resided lay just ahead. Although the forest goblin troops led by nobles were well equipped, their morale was high, and Lin knew breaking into the temple wasn't impossible. He just needed to seize this chance to destroy the portal and complete the main quest. The comrades surged forward, cutting down anyone in their path, while Lin spotted a gap and realized this was their opening. Nearby, two golems clashed. One swung its sword but it cracked, enraging it and releasing a red light. The panel revealed the secret art had activated, letting the injured golem unleash immense power at a cost. Lin understood the great shaman was controlling the battle, empowering allies to block any golems from reaching him. The great shaman's voice boomed, telling Giant Fang the fight could end if he surrendered, claiming he had watched him grow up. The prompt reminded Lin that, despite the shaman's level 1 supremacy, he had been deceived by the substitute pill. Lin asked what would happen to his comrades. The great shaman sneered, asking what gave him the right to negotiate, calling his subordinates weak peasants who would be slaughtered by temple guards, offering surrender as the greatest mercy, otherwise they would die together. A panel prompt noted that the shaman still saw Lin as a threat to his power. From behind, a goblin approached Lin, questioning if they were no match for the shamans, and he reassured them that even if only Lin survived, it would be enough. The shaman mocked him, saying he was smarter than the forest goblins who blindly worshipped him, urging Lin to lay down his weapon and return. Lin replied that in the shaman's eyes, they were lowly ants to be sacrificed, but he refused, declaring they were comrades, friends, and fellow warriors who shared the same oath to eliminate the tribe's injustice. Lin thought, at this critical moment, we cannot give up, we must boost morale and fight. He shouted, "Today it's either you die or I perish, no third option." The comrades roared, motivation surging, and Lin added, "The Nameless One's blood must not be shed in vain. Even if we are broken, we fall forward." The great shaman scoffed, "How foolish, dreaming of overturning the world." Suddenly, a comrade rushed in, shouting, "The front line is under attack by a large army of hairless people, unable to hold them off, reinforcements needed." Another shaman protested, "Impossible, the captives were too weak even for peasants, and General Bone Crusher guards the front line, it cannot be breached." The goblin delivering the news explained these enemies were unlike before, armored and resilient, with leaders capable of strange tactics that deflected simultaneous attacks. The shaman frowned, "These are rational foes, divinely guided or destined to kill." The comrades murmured in disbelief, "How could our enemies number an entire army?" Lin thought, "This was never meant to be my title fight, yet the ancient god's warrior sees every moment, and Captain Lu, that cunning strategist, is indeed formidable." A goblin pleaded, "Great shaman, send reinforcements quickly or General Bone Crusher will fall." The great shaman considered, "The urgent task is to fend off the powerful enemies. I will lead my followers, but the main forces must also be sent." Lin realized if all troops supporting the shaman leave, he can manipulate the situation. The great shaman Pistav scowled, "That scoundrel Giant Fang stirs rebellion yet pretends to care for the greater good." A goblin shouted, "Giant Fang makes sense, we must prioritize the bigger picture." Furious, the shaman declared, "The enemies of our race must be eradicated. Though Giant Fang led the rebellion and peasants killed many nobles, in facing our true enemies, we are all competitors, your sins are forgiven." He raised his spear, proclaiming a new law: any peasant who kills an enemy of our race on the battlefield will gain noble status. Shocked murmurs spread, rebellion forgiven, and they could even become nobles. Lin thought, the old man's decisive move cleverly divides interests. Other shamans questioned, "Great shaman, the peasants were foolishly incited by Giant Fang, pardonable, but why elevate them to nobles?" Giant Fang said, "Of course, this is not unconditional." He shouted that for the law to take effect, he must face the great shaman in a sacred duel to atone for all rebels' sins. The goblins loyal to the shaman clenched their teeth, thinking the shaman never intended to forgive the peasants but aimed to eliminate Giant Fang under the duel's pretext. Once their leader fell, dealing with the rest would be easy. Lin thought the old man clearly believed his strength as Giant Fang was far weaker, using the duel as a legitimate excuse to silence him. Even some forest goblins began wavering at the lure of noble status. Reading their hesitations, Lin realized greed and selfishness are chains that intelligent beings cannot escape. He smiled, knowing the chance had come to him, and declared aloud, "All right, I accept your duel invitation." Women shouted, "Giant Fang, you can't do this," pleading with comrades to stop him, warning that the shaman would use the duel to kill him. Lin replied, "Comrades, the duel is the most important matter now. If he refuses, the shaman will never join forces against our racial enemies. Remember, we fight to end exploitation and improve the tribe." Lin said if his death could bring safety to the tribe and ensure comrades were treated fairly, he would face it without regret. He told them that after he was gone, they need only remember their ideals and the reason they fight. Comrades began crying, some wishing for a swift resolution. One goblin shouted for Giant Fang not to go, while others wept, moved by his selflessness and courage, even as an enemy. With Giant Fang accepting the great shaman's duel, the internal strife of the Thunder tribe finally ended. The battlefield was engulfed in flames, comrades and goblins alike fallen to the ground. At the front line, the remaining comrades tried to strike back but were trapped in a web of electric light. A man laughed, saying their tricks worked on minions but were useless against a mini-boss triggering a hunting quest. Yun snapped, "I've already immobilized it, hurry and attack." The man replied, "I don't need telling, I know well enough." A goblin caught in the electric strips cursed, wishing for a shaman and secret arts to strengthen them. The man leapt from above, slashing a goblin in half with a single strike. Elsewhere, Captain Lu ordered that after the forest goblins were wiped out, a full assault on the tribe would begin, determined to claim the main quest. The sacred duel with Giant Fang was set in the ancestral spirit arena north of the temple, where each participant could bring one trained creature as an assistant. No goblins aside from the duelists were allowed, and once the doors closed, the arena became a sealed black box. A shaman riding a centaur said to Giant Fang, "Your way of inciting peasants is clever, but peasants are foolish. Offer them a small benefit, and they will crumble." Lin yawned, thinking trash talking before a duel is a real tradition. Mia readied herself, thinking it was finally time to act as a slave. Lin turned to her, saying she didn't need to pretend anymore, and handed her an item that would enhance her abilities. The great shaman glared, saying a centaur with a slave collar has no will of its own. Are you crazy, Giant Fang? Mia loosed an arrow at Lin, but he was protected by a defensive layer. Lin asked if it was the centaur's special archery, noticing it still retained its consciousness. He urged Mia to use all the arrows he had prepared, and she fired relentlessly, each arrow seeming like a small bomb. The great shaman dodged, extending his staff to cast spell Battle Memory Recall, and his centaur fired arrows at Lin as well. Mia's arrows collided with the great shaman's, producing a massive explosion. Lin smirked, noting he had traded points with his assistant for these explosive arrows, pleased with the effect. The great shaman, furious, admitted he had underestimated him. A prompt appeared, stating that although the attack had caused surprise damage, the great ancestor's blessing healed most wounds, and the same trick would not work again. The great shaman glared at Lin, noting, Giant Fang, I did not expect your playful, indulgent act to hide such ambition and cunning. Do you really think restoring your centaur slave's old combat skills can defeat me? I will restore my slave's combat memory too. His own centaur, bow drawn, aimed directly at Lin. Lin thought, it's not that simple after all. The great shaman leapt down, declaring, your slave cannot match my mount. This duel will soon have a winner. Lin noticed his opponent's centaur quietly gathering power and smirked, remembering the explosive arrows he'd prepared. 5 points per set, 10 arrows each, 9 sets still left. He turned to Mia, urging, use the explosive arrows on the centaur. Mia, remember your promise. To get revenge, we must be ready to sacrifice, even if he is one of our kind. She nodded, trusting Lin, and unleashed the arrows toward the great shaman's centaur. As the enemy arrows veered toward Mia, they inexplicably redirected, exploding elsewhere. Shocked, she whispered, how is this possible? The great shaman shouted, that mount was once the centaur tribe's chieftain, their finest archer. Your slave's skill is transparent to me. Lin commanded Sister Mia, execute the tactic. Climbing onto her, she surged forward. The great shaman scoffed, do you think merging with your centaur gives you a chance? You cannot even reach my mount. Mia held Lin firmly as he prepared, but it was too late. The shaman barked, this is impossible, a centaur fusion. Even if you beg now, mercy will not come, and he ordered his centaur, aim all arrows at Giant Fang and fire. Lin pushes his wrist forward, noting that the great shaman is fully focused on him, which means Mia is safe for now. A protective dome surrounds Lin, deflecting the incoming arrows, and the great shaman shouts, demanding when he learns such a secret technique. Lin seizes the chance, leaping toward the centaur as Mia fires all her remaining 8 arrows in rapid succession, triggering massive explosions one after another. Still, the great shaman survives, thinking his secret technique is nearly complete, and that Giant Fang has exhausted all his special arrows. From the shadows, Chirp suddenly arrives, propelling herself with her weapon toward the great shaman. The great shaman, startled, wonders if this is another of Giant Fang's tricks. Pink light begins to radiate around him as he prepares something immense. Mia yells in alarm, and Lin realizes the situation is far from simple. The power gap between the spider matriarch and the great shaman is too great, and no tactic can fully overcome it. The great shaman declares the effort useless, asserting that his continuously enhanced secret strength makes him untouchable. Suddenly, a colossal eruption of light bursts from him like a massive beast, and he proclaims the completion of his ultimate secret art, Thunder Shaman Summoning. At that moment, the great ancestor's spirit power blesses him, making him invincible, and the overwhelming energy hurls Chirp far across the battlefield. Chirp didn't pause, quickly spitting out a spider web to shield herself, and the web absorbed the impact, keeping her safe. The great shaman sneered, monster, strike with all your strength and I will show you the true blessing of the great ancestor. The prompt flashed, announcing that the big one had arrived after the Thunder Shaman summoning. Even a level 1 summoning attack was already surrounded by overwhelming spirit power. Lin observed, guessing cautiously, although not certain, that every instance task arranged by the ancient gods seems to have an instance boss. These bosses not only have immense attributes but also wield unique leader-level skills. Such skills usually give the boss a massive advantage but often come with some weakness. Clearly, this great shaman is the instance boss, and his leader-level skill is Thunder Shaman Summoning. If they could uncover a flaw in that skill, They might defeat him at minimal cost. Otherwise, the threat was staggering. The shaman's voice cut through. It's too late to be afraid now, Giant Fang. I will torture the monster you command before executing you and offering every inch of your flesh to the great ancestor. Chirp readied herself to strike, but the shaman's dark pink energy extended from his hand, grabbing her from below. Mia shouted, firing arrows, but they had no effect. The shaman's focus remained unbroken, effortlessly dodging Chirp's blade strike as she swung, leaving her bruised and battered on the ground. He bellowed, "Your attacks are useless against me," and released another surge of immense energy. Streaks of radiant light rained down, exploding on impact and striking Mia and Chirp. Mia cried that glory as a warrior mattered, and Lin desperately formed a barrier around himself, struggling to protect them. The shaman's voice thundered, "Giant Fang, your so-called power is nothing before me. Even if you save them now, what then? In the end, all of you will be slaughtered by my hand." Noticing that Lin remained silent, the great shaman sneered, "Are you too afraid to speak?" Lin met his gaze calmly. "Great shaman, haven't you noticed that even with all your spirit power and tricks, either I nor my creature have wavered?" The shaman's eyes narrowed. "Are you claiming to be a warrior trying to save face before your death?" Lin lifted a finger. "No, I am merely stating the facts. Despite the overwhelming might of your leader's skills, I have understood them for a long time." The shaman recoiled. "You've known of my ultimate skill?" "Impossible. Everyone who knew of it has perished." "Could it be?" Lin's expression was steady. As expected of a forest goblin with 12 mentality, you finally realize it. From the side, Chirp launched herself at the shaman. The shaman's voice dripped with contempt. "You weak creature, how do you even have a finishing move?" Chirp's form suddenly expanded with the mercy of the godless desire, her energy surging toward the shaman. He felt it hit him. This power surge rivals the strength I've gained from spirit essence. I see now, this creature's finishing move is explosive, concentrating all its might into a single strike. If I can block this, it is over, if not. The attack from Chirp surged forward, her form glowing with concentrated energy. But the great shaman crossed his arms, smirking. "The great ancestor's blessing will not break so easily, Giant Fang. Even if your creature unleashes all its strength, it cannot pierce my defense. You lose." Lin's eyes narrowed. As expected, the moment of narrow escape is when one's guard drops the most. The spider matriarch's leader skill, Mercy of the God, distant of desire, channels the entire body's strength into a single strike, and according to the attribute panel, its power scales with both strength and agility. Lin calculated, judging from previous encounters, even the great shaman, amplified by his leader-level secret technique, could only barely deflect this if fully exerted. Lin commanded, "Finish it, little Chirp's sister." Chirp's strength and agility surged by one, and she shot forward. The shaman roared as his barrier shattered, a massive blast erupting around him. Lin smirked. Just as planned, the great shaman was caught off guard, and with morale-boosted attributes, Chirp's strike, the spider matriarch leader skill, smashed through the defense, striking the great shaman down in a single, decisive blow, the only path to victory. Chirp landed heavily on the ground, her prompt showing that after using her leader skill, the spider matriarch entered a weakened state, having her base strength and agility. She had become weaker. It was time to shift from defense to offense. Lin muttered, "Why does this prompt make me feel like I'm freeloading?" Now was clearly not the time to ponder that. Priority was loot, the corpse to scavenge. The shaman's body had been sliced apart, pieces scattered across the battlefield. Lin, nose wrinkling at the smell, noted how thoroughly it had been cut, yet wondered why it was in so many pieces. Was the spider matriarch's leader skill really this bizarre? Checking the panel, he realized the old shaman's equipment would likely enhance attributes, and he couldn't afford to miss it. Behind him, Chirp looked his way. Lin asked, "Are you okay? Don't push yourself." She extended her weapon to help retrieve the gear he was trying to grab. Lin noticed another Fang pendant. Could it be that all goblins' enhancement gear came in the form of pendants? Chirp glanced at him, and he offered, "Do you want me to put this on for you?" She smirked as he placed it on her, thinking that the best gear seemed naturally meant for her. As the pendant settled, her weakened state began to recover, though the agility increase was only 1 point. Could it be that the great shaman's pendant was merely more ornate, providing no greater benefit than the common ones? Then Chirp did something unusual. She grabbed her previous pendant and began eating it. Lin noticed that the spider matriarch's agility hadn't changed at all. She was still wearing the great shaman's pendant, But technically, that didn't count as equipping it. The pendant could increase agility by 2 points, but its bonus didn't stack with her original 1-point pendant. Lin said aloud, "Little chirp sister, since you like it so much, just treat it as a snack," and she began eating it. He thought that once attribute enhancements couldn't stack, the replaced gear was of little use anyway. After all, the ancient god hadn't enabled equipment recycling yet, and monster gear couldn't be sold to players, so using it to keep the spider matriarch happy was fine. As she finished, the prompt updated. Although invisible now, her body had absorbed traces of XX power, showing an evolution trend uncommon in normal spider matriarchs. Wow, she was really lucky. Lin wondered what this power was, suspecting something unspeakable, but judging from the prompt, the changes worked in his favor, so there was no worry. Then he heard Mia shouting and turned to see her holding the centaur on her lap. Lin thought that although the centaur slave had regained normal combat skill, his consciousness hadn't returned. He was still bound by the great shaman's secret technique to replay battle memories. Lin said sorry, there was no way to save him. After the cursed slave collar, his soul was gone. Mia began to cry, but Lin realized that though she and the spider matriarch were injured, they could still fight, so there was no rush. He told Mia, "Sister, we have more important matters. We must destroy the altar at the temple's center." As long as it stood, forest goblins would continue invading from another world, and disasters like the centaur tribe's fate would repeat. She wiped her tears, saying it was their responsibility, and let go of the dead centaur. Lin noted that despite her rich emotions, Mia didn't let them hinder her actions in critical moments. Her simplicity, kindness, and focus made her an ideal candidate for a pact. A squad of goblins gathered around their general, urging him to act, but he waved them off, saying to let the pythons die first and weaken the enemy before they struck. Below the cliff, countless goblins stood with bloodshot eyes. One warrior shouted not to be reckless, reminding them that Giant Fong had warned before leaving, they should fight for their tribe, not be used by exiles. A female goblin urged them to pull back and regroup with the main army, but the weaker goblins, twisted by pain and ambition, snapped back, calling her an idiot. They mocked the idea of listening to Giant Fong, claiming that if they waited to charge with the regular army, they would never earn glory. This, they said, was their chance to take heads and rise as new nobles, and they would not give it up. The female goblin sighed, saying it was their choice, while a guard admitted he understood yet still could not make sense of it all. Meanwhile, Lin, Mia, and Chirp pressed on toward the temple. Lin thought aloud that in a battle where the tribe's very survival hung in balance, the temple being so heavily guarded by 2 capital temple guards meant something truly important was hidden inside. Captain Lo raised a loudspeaker and shouted that ahead stood the very source of the forest goblins, and once they broke through the enemy troops blocking their way, the main quest set by the ancient god would finally be completed. He told them this battle would decide victory for humanity, warning it would be soaked in blood and sweat, but the battlefield between life and death was no stranger to them. He reminded them each had been blessed with equipment by the ancient god, declaring that from this moment, they had stepped into the realm of the extraordinary. A real estate man in the ranks thought to himself that Captain Lo's way of stirring hearts was remarkable, believing that if a warrior's power was 5 points before, his speech alone could double it. The captain pressed on, saying for this decisive battle they had made full preparations, pointing ahead as he reminded them they held the blessings of heaven, the support of the tavern, and unity among humans. The fight would be brutal, but their advantages could carry them through, so he ordered everyone to charge. The soldiers roared and rushed forward, clashing with the goblins whose ambition to become nobles had lured them into battle. At the same time, Lin ascended toward the temple, glancing up at its peak and noting that no shield or trap had been triggered along the way, so all that remained was to destroy the altar. Yet the altar suddenly glowed with a sinister purple energy, bursting upward like a blazing pillar. That light struck the goblins who were fighting, wrapping their bodies in swirling purple flames. One goblin shouted in awe that the great ancestor was protecting them, claiming he could feel strength surging through his body. The humans near him cried out in shock as they saw the forest goblin's power increase drastically. Captain Lo's jaw tightened as he realized their enemy's combat strength had suddenly multiplied, and if they did not act fast, even a victory would cost them too many lives, leaving no one left to command afterward. Captain Lu roared that command was now handed over to Jingqi, declaring this battle must not be lost and from here on he would lead the charge himself. From the rear, Jingqi shouted back in alarm, asking if Lu was trying to get himself killed, but Lu only urged his brother to follow, and the warriors rushed behind him with renewed momentum. Meanwhile, above the temple, the altar unleashed a torrent of energy as Lin raised his barrier, grimly noting that while he did not know what the black aura was, nothing about it seemed good. He told himself it did not matter, all that mattered was to destroy the altar, claim the main quest reward, and leave this place. With that, he ordered Chirp to strike, and she dashed forward, smashing her weapon into the altar and splitting it with a sharp crack, yet the black aura only grew denser. Lin grimaced, realizing the aura was harmful to him, draining his shield at a terrifying rate. His eyes darted to his companions, worrying the spider matriarch and the centaur girl had no such shield to protect them, which meant they might already be in danger. But when he looked closer, he froze. Mia was surrounded by the black mist, yet instead of suffering, she looked strangely relieved, and Chirp also showed no distress. Lin quickly pieced it together, realizing aloud that the mist was harmless to monsters and in fact seemed to strengthen them instead. Mia asked if they should step in to help, but Lin reassured her not to worry, saying the little spider matriarch was fine. He observed that her injuries were healed and her weakened state had lifted, realizing the black aura was accelerating her growth, so there was no need to resist it. Yet, though Mia's wounds also closed, she gained no strength from the aura. He frowned, wondering why. His attention shifted to Chirp, who was now rising slightly as if lifted by the dark power, and a prompt appeared stating her attributes had increased after absorbing traces of the aura. Lin's mind raced, recalling a vague earlier message that described these beings as tied to some unknown X, and now both terms echoed in his thoughts, unsettling him with a strange sense of recognition. Suddenly, the back of his hand glowed red, and Chirp let out a cry of pain. He instantly sensed she could not take in any more of the energy, even without the prompt's warning. Calling out for her to finish it, he urged her to destroy the altar completely so they could escape. Chirp roared in defiance, her morale bolstered by his words, and Mia raised her bow beside her, firing arrows as Chirp struck with all her strength. The altar cracked, burst apart, and exploded in a blinding surge of energy. On the battlefield below, the evolved goblins cloaked in black aura suddenly faltered as the sinister energy around them dissolved. Their power vanished, leaving them weak and disoriented. Captain Lu's voice thundered over the chaos, announcing the strange force had disappeared and that the goblins could no longer stand against them. Rallying his soldiers, he shouted for them to charge, and the tide of battle shifted as humans surged forward. Panic spread among the goblins as they realized the truth, crying out that something was wrong, admitting they could not win, and ordering a retreat. As the humans finally overwhelmed the goblins, a glowing prompt appeared before Captain Lu announcing the Forest Goblin main quest progress. Goblins, who were never part of the original world, had been born through the altar, and now the objective to destroy the Thunder tribe of goblins stood at 1 of 1, while the Forest Goblin altar remained at 0. Declaring the first phase complete, he ordered his soldiers to follow him into the village to finish the rest and claim rich rewards. Meanwhile, Lin stood before the shattered altar, confirming to himself that the black mist was tied directly to it, and once it was destroyed the aura vanished. Another screen materialized before him, marking both objectives, destroying the Hunter tribe and destroying the Forest Goblin altar, as fully complete. Relieved, he noted the main quest was finished and quickly checked the tally of individual contributions. Seeing how rapidly the numbers had climbed, he thought to himself that Captain Lu and the ancient god warriors were indeed strong, and if they pressed forward much longer, they would likely breach the Thunder tribe soon. Deciding it was time to retreat, he moved out swiftly. At that same moment, Captain Lu climbed the temple steps, pride swelling as he considered how much effort and points he had spent, even fighting at the front line, all in pursuit of the high main quest reward. But then a cold notification rang out across the battlefield, declaring the main quest complete and calculating contributions. His expression froze in disbelief. He muttered in shock, realizing he had never uncovered the so-called twisted route, and yet the quest had already ended. Suspicion gripped him. Had someone taken advantage of their battle with the goblin army to sneak into the village and destroy the altar while its defenses were down? As the implications sank in, furious voices erupted among his team. They shouted that whoever had stolen the objective was practically an enemy of all humanity, spitting rage that such treachery could not go unpunished, cursing the unseen party and calling for a fate worse than death for them. The voice announced that Captain Lu's individual contribution ranked second and the main quest reward would now be distributed. He thought with frustration that all his effort and planning for the top reward had gone to waste, the results stolen by someone else's work, and he swore to uncover who was behind it and make them pay. Lin then heard the ancient god's voice telling him his personal contribution ranked first, and he would soon receive the reward for completing the main storyline task. He thought the ancient god's judgment was fair, and since the spider matriarch had gained a boost, he was now eligible for the top reward, which felt like a rich return. His reward was Agatha's level 1 combat red armor, and his eyes widened as he realized red rank was the highest quality. He wondered if the ancient god could truly be so generous. Mia saw him staring and asked what he was looking at, as nothing was visible to her. The ancient god's voice explained that the main storyline reward chest had no location restrictions and could be opened at any time, with a 90% chance of gold gear and a 10% chance of red gear, the same applying to other chest tiers. Lin opened the chest, holding the armor while thinking that opening an ancient god chest was as thrilling as a blind draw. He recalled being lucky once before when he drew purple gear from a purple chest, and since this one could be opened outside, there was no reason to wait. He wanted to test his luck immediately. As Lin opened the armor chest, a golden light burst out, and he quickly thought with excitement that this was good stuff. The probability pointed to gold gear, and his guess was confirmed when a golden cloud appeared, glowing and revolving before him. Overjoyed, he saw the panel and said it was the Nimbus Cloud, a treasure that could cross mountains and valleys, cover thousands of miles in a day, and accomplish almost anything. Although there was little written about it on the panel, he wondered if it counted as a mount, realizing this meant he would no longer need the spider matriarch to carry him for fast travel. Even though it could not fly outright, its hovering ability could bypass many obstacles, which made him very pleased. At that moment, Mia pointed at him in shock, and he quickly realized too much time had passed since he last took the medicine. The illusion effect of the substitute pill combined with the translation jelly beans had worn off, revealing his human form before her eyes. A prompt appeared, stating that even though she had witnessed his transformation from goblin to human, she showed no wariness, which Lin called naive. He calmly took another jelly bean, tasting its familiar flavor, and thought the prompt misunderstood everything. His identity might be false, but defeating the great shaman and helping Mia seek revenge were real, and her affection for him was already high. After swallowing the pill, he reassured her, saying he was fine and that the curse on him seemed to be changing for the better. She relaxed and told him that was good, then pointed at the sky where a glowing cloud suddenly appeared. From above, a radiant presence descended, resembling a sentient light. Lin thought that after leaving the tribe, he heard a voice within his mind, which felt like the spirit of Mia's centaur ancestor offering thanks. When she asked where the ancestor's spirit was, he told her that, for some reason, only he could hear it, and it spoke of praising their courage for avenging their kin, granting him this cloud as a reward. Mia looked a little downhearted, saying she truly wished to meet the ancestor, and Lin gently patted her, telling her not to be discouraged, since if the ancestral spirit appeared once, it could always appear again, and they would surely meet him in the future. Inwardly he thought that her personality matched his own well, making a contract with her likely stable, though he knew it could only be done after he leveled up, and her role was not fundamentally different from the spider matriarch. He reasoned it would be best to form a contract with a monster that complemented the matriarch. From behind, the chirp shifted as if wanting to speak, her tone sharp with irritation, and Lin wondered if the matriarch was upset from being overlooked. He quickly told her not to worry, assuring her he was only comforting Mia and meant nothing else. But she pressed closer until he relented with surprise, patting her head to ease her. As he did, he thought seriously about the future, realizing that forming contracts with willful monsters meant he would have to carefully balance their relationships. Turning back to Mia, he questioned whether to keep her close or let her wander, yet neither choice seemed quite right. At that moment she declared she wished to save her people just as he did, and instantly she was struck with a surge of energy as a radiant ancient presence appeared above them. The spirit's voice rang out, calling her its descendant who bore the blood of kings, and that her will to protect her clan had awakened it. It told her if she truly wished to save her people, she must return to the grassland, undergo the trial, inherit the title of Centaur King, reclaim the lost treasure, restore its broken strength, and revive the glory of the Centaur Kingdom. As the ancient god's light faded, Lin narrowed his eyes and thought, unsure why such a vision appeared but concluding that the centaurs must have once possessed a kingdom, leaving behind royal bloodlines, and now Mia was chosen to inherit that power and become the new ruler, a king, or rather, a queen. Mia stood frozen in disbelief, her thoughts reeling as she whispered inwardly, "Inherit the throne, is this really true?" Lin spent a long time talking with Mia and finally pieced together the truth about the Centaur King and the Fallen Kingdom. From her words, he learned that the Centaurs were once the rulers of the vast grasslands, steadily expanding until they built a prosperous and powerful kingdom under a mighty leader, the first and only Centaur King. That king valued strength and ability over bloodline, refusing to let his throne pass to relatives. Instead, he left behind a series of trials, declaring that only those who cleared them could claim the throne. But this decision did not bring prosperity. Instead, after his death, the kingdom fractured as countless factions rose up, each claiming rightful rule. Their infighting came at the worst possible time, for an unprecedented threat soon descended upon them: hordes of goblins. With enemies pressing from within and without, the once glorious Centaur kingdom quickly crumbled. Splintered tribes scattered and fled, eventually driven far from the grassland until they settled here. Over time, they lost contact with one another, and their customs shifted so much that Mia did not even doubt Lin when he spoke nonsense about being a centaur, thinking it natural given the centuries that had passed. Mia removed the collar, bowing her head as she softly pleaded for the Centaur King to lift the curse. But her voice trembled with doubt as she admitted she was too weak for the trials, insisting Lin should become king since he had defeated the goblin shaman. Lin shook his head firmly, telling her the image of the Centaur King had chosen her for a reason, that the battle against the shaman was not his victory alone but the effort of everyone, and she deserved the right to inherit the throne. Inwardly, he thought there was no way a false centaur like him could claim the title, and pointed instead to the distant grasslands, urging her to move forward and take her place as ruler while he stood behind her in support. Yet a quiet thought lingered: if Mia became the Centaur King, perhaps he might one day form a contract with her, making the situation far from meaningless. From the side, Chirp was clearly upset. Her mood soured, and Lin sighed inwardly, telling himself he would spend time with her later to ease her anger. Mia, with resolve in her eyes, said they should return to the grasslands to inherit the throne, but Lin apologized gently, reminding her that because of the curse he could not stray too far from the forest. He tried to comfort her, saying that though he could not accompany her directly back to the grasslands, his heart remained firmly set on helping her no matter what. Lin weighed the situation carefully, thinking he still did not know how far he could stray from the ancient grot without its shop. Without that, he could not continue leveling, so letting Mia take the trial alone seemed the only option. Yet sending her off empty-handed felt wrong. She needed proper gear. The problem was he had already used up his helper time and had to return to headquarters. He told her not to leave just yet, asking to set up a way to contact her before heading out. She nodded gently, saying she would wait for him. Meanwhile, inside the Hunter Tribe temple, Captain Lu crouched before the shattered altar while the people behind him shouted in alarm. They saw the great shaman goblin's corpse outside and the altar in ruins, cursing that all their effort had been wasted now that the boss was dead. Several men pressed him for answers, demanding what they should do next after fighting so hard for so long. Captain Lu, calm and deliberate, told them not to rush. He had just uncovered something important and revealed his panel, which displayed the new mission: expel the Twisted Root Goblin area, time task. It explained that while the twisted creatures had been destroyed, their spawn remained. The objective was clear: within 24 hours, eliminate as many goblins in the forest as possible. The rules were unusual. Points would not be fixed but calculated by how many goblins each person killed. Everyone would earn points directly, and it was marked as the final task of the first phase, meaning clearing it would bring the phase to an early close. When the task was shared with the group, voices erupted with questions. Captain Lu raised his hand and spoke firmly, explaining that goblins were invasive creatures, and the main quest had nearly spelled it out. The first step was cutting off their leader, and the second was wiping out the rest. Though he admitted the one who claimed the main quest reward was hateful, he pointed out that killing the shaman had shattered goblin morale, making them easy prey. He urged them all to act quickly, declaring it was time to slaughter, for countless coins awaited them. His words ignited excitement among the group, their eyes shining at the prospect of rich rewards. From the shadows, someone observed him closely, realizing Captain Lu's sharpness. He had cleverly triggered a task that promised massive gains, but his generosity in sharing it raised questions. It was not about team points. His true aim was to flush out whoever had taken the main quest reward. In a task where points were tallied individually, that person would not go unnoticed. By examining the rankings later, he could narrow down the suspects, if not outright confirm the culprit. and since the task guaranteed team rewards, no one would skip participating. At worst, he would at least confirm the mole did not belong to his team. Mia nervously followed the trail, her mind drifting as she wondered what role Lin would take if she truly became queen. She imagined him as a kingdom warrior, then as her personal guard, but the thought made her blush, and she shook her head, scolding herself to focus on the trial instead of daydreaming. Suddenly, Lin appeared from behind, startling her. She turned quickly and asked if everything was settled. He motioned toward the crowd of centaurs he had brought, explaining that it was nothing difficult. He had used the Nimbus cloud to gather the enslaved centaurs. With the goblin tribe destroyed, they were free, though still unable to speak. Acting only on instinct, they could not fully return to normal, but as fellow kin, he could command them easily. He assured her they would wait until she came back as their queen. She nodded with determination, saying she would hurry, and he agreed, then reached into his pocket. Producing a pendant, he placed it around her neck and told her it was a communicator. Her eyes widened with surprise as he explained that if she ever faced trouble, she only needed to hold it, silently call his name, and he would hear. But he warned her to use it sparingly, as it had a limited number of uses. Lin had spent his last 5 points to buy it, leaving himself broke, but thought it was a worthy investment for her sake. He told her not to worry, for even if he could not leave the forest, he would still find a way to help her. Moved, she smiled warmly, thanked him, and hugged him, telling him to take care. He reminded her that centaurs were few on this continent, so they must look out for one another. Waving goodbye, she promised to return, and he replied he would wait to hear good news from her as the new queen. Watching her leave, Lin thought to himself that the centaur matter was settled for now, and it was time to focus on the other side. The next morning, a notification flashed before everyone, announcing that the task was complete, 50 points granted to the task receiver, and the first phase of the major mission officially concluded. All tasks were paused and the leaderboard revealed. Cheers broke out among the crowd as people shouted how incredible 50 points was, thrilled that the night's effort had not been wasted, their efficiency better than ever before. Meanwhile, the captains gathered to review the results. One woman reported that her people had monitored the rankings closely, but everyone's scores looked average with no one standing out. Another agreed, saying the same applied to their team. Captain Lu added that no suspicious individuals were found on his side either, concluding that whoever defeated the final boss was not in their group. One captain slammed a fist, vowing to remember the grudge against whoever had stolen the victory, swearing they would not get away once discovered. Captain Lu then addressed them, admitting that though he had brought them together, the outcome had not met expectations and he considered it his failure. He offered to personally take on the responsibility of finding the mysterious individual. But in his thoughts, he considered the danger an opportunity. Someone strong enough to finish the boss alone was powerful, perhaps strong enough to recruit, and if not, he would deal with them directly. Just then, one of the women interjected, saying Lu had already gone to great lengths to trigger the final scoring task for everyone, so any talk of failure was unnecessary. She insisted it was not a trivial matter either, and that the person in question was not hard to find. She instructed them to open the point ranking and scroll upward, pointing out that one kid who had scored 0 in the last task had suddenly surged forward with a massive leap this time, making it highly likely they had identified their target. Somewhere else, inside a tent, a goblin rushed up the stairs in panic, shouting that the Thunder Tribe had been attacked, their sacred altar destroyed, and the great shaman killed. But when he peeked inside, the tent was empty. Confused, he looked around, and from the wall behind him a sharp blade shot out, piercing his neck. A man stepped from the wall, gripping the body and muttering that the 10th one was finished. At once, a notification appeared before him, declaring he had slain 10 goblin leaders and earned the Goblin Leader Slayer reward, along with the update that the first phase of the major task was complete and all tasks were paused. Seeing the points ranking announced, he smirked, realizing he had jumped straight to the top. He admitted he might have gone too far this time and expected trouble, yet his naturally low presence in reality had become a massive advantage here. Humans could still see him, but monsters were completely blind to his existence, which was how he had managed to obtain the supposedly unreachable final prize in the Spider Cave, the Glass Exchange Tome of the 5-Element Emissary. With its Earth Escape ability, he could move unseen, unlike against the spiders, and now slip in and out of goblin camps at will. Confident in his lead, he resolved not to hide anymore but to expand it further, then sank into the ground as if swallowed by the earth itself. Back at the tent where the captains gathered, the chief discussed the possible traitor, insisting it was not Lin but another man named Ping, who had previously ranked in the top 100. He then questioned how someone called Si Rayang, who had scored nothing in the first trial, had suddenly shot to first place. The others admitted they had never seen him and did not recognize the name, one man growling that if he ever met Si Rayang, he would settle the score. A girl pushed back, saying they were jumping to conclusions, maybe he just triggered a rare reward task, and warned against accusing innocent people without proof. Their clash only highlighted the rivalry that had always existed, and Captain Lu realized this was becoming a two-choice standoff. In his mind, he leaned toward Yumin, despite her lower score, since the other man's reckless behavior could damage his team's reputation. Speaking up, he reminded Miss Yu that her previous job was as a detective, and asked if she could apply her skills here. She sighed, saying she hadn't cared much about who got the final reward, but if they insisted, she would build a criminal profile based on the scene. She explained that the victim's final moments showed signs of a violent struggle. His body carried wounds from blades, arrows, and even explosive burns, which suggested either multiple attackers or one skilled fighter capable of both ranged and close combat. Since the goblins had been organized before their assault, the culprit must have acted around the same time they did, which ruled out the chance of an insider. Large groups were too conspicuous for such stealth, so the work was likely of one person, two at most. Based on the traces left behind, the physique, movements, and combat style, she inferred their class and began connecting it to their social circle. Writing as she spoke, she finally identified the suspect by name. Meanwhile, Lin stood silently, reading the panel that announced the Phase 1 task rankings were now paused. Taking a long breath, he recalled giving equipment to the sentient girl, realizing his kindness had driven the spider away and angered the matriarch. To appease her, he had been forced to wear 3 silk garments she made, which was irritating yet oddly satisfying, since she was powerful, striking, and had granted him many benefits. Still, he wondered what Captain Lu's reaction to the rankings was on the other side. Once free, he returned to headquarters to rest. Even without points left, he thought it worthwhile to check if stronger equipment had appeared. Yet the shelves still carried useless gear, wasting his time. The crowd instead gathered around the bounty board, loudly debating the notice. Some questioned what the wanted person had done to attract so many experts. Others muttered about the 400-point reward, dreaming of catching them. Lin looked closer, thinking the bounty might be about him. The notice described a warrior who had slain the forest goblin boss and rescued an ancient god warrior, but vanished before thanks could be given. Now, they sought information and promised 400 points for verified clues. Lin muttered inwardly that the reward was generous and perhaps a way to recruit powerful fighters, but decided not to reveal himself. Remaining a carefree loner seemed safer. He noted that the portrait did not match him, confirming he wasn't their target, and so he relaxed. But just then, a hand gripped his shoulder from behind, stopping him cold.